Chapter 302. What did Deputy Prefect Ren talk about today? During dinner, Tong Jingye casually asked Tong Lan. He was really curious about what Rinpochen would talk about. In his heart, Rinpochen had a lot of good stuff. Whether it was the cement, red bricks, glass factory or solar furnace, they were all very useful. Furthermore, he took them out casually. No one knew how many things he had in his stomach. At the very least, he didn't know about the colorful things that he saw in Yangxin Palace Hall. There were also the 2 floor lamps of the Empress, the sofa in Yangxin Palace Hall, the computer that could emit sound, and the ice that was made from ice. There were simply too many of them. This was also the reason why he sent his favorite granddaughter to Yangxin Palace Hall. I don't know. He talked a lot and was very long-winded. Tong Lan curled her lips. She really didn't understand many of the things that Rinpochen talked about today. However, how could she ask since no one asked? She was a genius. Tell me, what did he talk about? Tong Jingye asked again. He said that they are all good-for-nothings. If they go home, they can only be kept as pets for the rest of their lives. Studying at the academy is their only chance. Tong Lan consciously excluded herself from the conversation. There was also an idiot who wasn't convinced. In the end, that good-for-nothing used a stick to shoot a few things at him and beat him to the ground. Then he was chased out. Tong Lan giggled again. Tong Jingye nodded his head slightly. Rinpochen's words were correct in some aspects. Those who weren't talented weren't valued at home. They couldn't advance in their cultivation and wouldn't be able to achieve anything in the future. They could only take the monthly allowance to produce offspring. He also said that he wanted to teach us 4 subjects and teach us how to read. It's different from before, Tong Lan continued. Oh, how different? Tong Jingye was very interested and asked. The surrounding people didn't say anything as they listened to the conversation between the adult and the child. They were also very interested. At least when Tong Jingye was in the residence, he praised Rinpochen a few times. This caused the people in the Tong residence to view Rinpochen differently from the general view of the outside world. He said that the language of Great Xia that we used in the past is too cumbersome. He wants to teach us a simpler language that is easier to spread. Tong Lan repeated Rinpochen's words about how many people could read the news. From national affairs to your fight with Mr. Qin at the brothel last night. Tong Lan told him everything in full detail, and the entire hall quietened down instantly. There was dead silence. Everyone had a strange look on their faces. Cough, cough. Tong Jingye coughed. Soon after, he thought about the news that Rinpochen mentioned. However, it didn't make much sense no matter how he thought about it. It was similar to a notice board. What else? Tong Jingye continued to ask. There are also 3 subjects: mathematics, physics, and chemistry. He said that physics is the study of the structure and laws of the world, and chemistry is the study of the composition of the world and the transformation of new substances. These 2 subjects are called natural sciences. Tong Jingye's expression immediately turned serious after hearing what Tong Lan said. Tong Lan didn't know what this meant, but she immediately sensed some problems. According to these words, he was clearly talking about the way of all living things in the world and nature? Didn't this mean that he was talking about all the principles in the world? If that was the case, then what Rinpochen said was rather shocking. But was what he said true? What did he say? Tong Jingye pondered for a moment and said, remember what he said every day and bring it back for Grandpa to see. Tong Lan pouted and replied. It was too troublesome for her to remember. She felt that she was in big trouble. On this day there were many people who had the same conversation. Many of them didn't care about what Rinpochen said at first, but after listening to others they paid attention. After all, Rinpochen's words were too scary. Studying the structure of the world, its composition, laws, and the transformation of new substances. No matter how they heard it, it wasn't an ordinary thing. The way of all living things in the world and nature. Many people immediately thought of the legendary way of heaven. How could they not care about it? At this moment, the Empress was curled up on the sofa. Rinpochen was sitting on a small stool outside the courtyard of Yangxin Palace Hall. There was a bonfire in front of him and a rack on top of it. Rinpochen was roasting a leg of lamb. One hand was shaking the stick while the other hand was cutting the leg of lamb. In the past, Rinpochen always thought that there was nothing that couldn't be solved with a barbecue. If there was, then he would have 2. However, there weren't any lamb skewers here. He could only rely on himself. He slowly roasted a lamb for 2 hours. The smell of the roasted meat had already spread to Yangxin Palace Hall. The Empress sniffed, turned her head to look in the direction of the main hall's entrance, and continued to watch a television series. Just when the Empress's patience was about to run out, Rinpochen came in with a basin. It was emitting an extremely fragrant barbecue aroma that made people salivate. As for the guards outside Yangxin Palace Hall, they had a look of hidden bitterness on their faces. That person had been roasting meat under their noses for more than 2 hours. The two of them had been smelling the aroma for more than 2 hours. It was simply a kind of torture. Ren Baqin and the Empress sat opposite each other at a small table. Ren Baqin poured a cup of wine for the Empress and a cup for himself. It definitely wouldn't do to eat barbecue without wine. There were also 2 plates of fruits at the side so that the roasted meat wouldn't be too greasy. The Empress stuffed 2 big pieces of meat into her stomach and drank a cup of wine before asking casually, "I heard that something happened on the first day of school?" The Empress already knew about this news, but she only asked about it now. An uncut jade can't be useful and an uncut person can't be straight. I'll teach them a lesson first so that they can be disciplined in the future. Ren Baqin smiled casually. Even though those guys weren't very talented, they weren't honest. If he didn't suppress them from the start, it would be difficult to discipline them in the future. The Empress nodded her head. I reckon that someone will complain about us tomorrow. Ren Baqin continued. The Empress snorted coldly, how dare they? Ren Baqin gave her a thumbs up. I like this domineering style of yours. What was a backer? This was it. Regardless of whether what he did was right or wrong, anyone who dared to raise an opinion would be beaten up. I heard that you are going to talk about the principles of heaven and earth. I'm very happy. Even though the Empress's tone was flat, there was still a hint of happiness in her words. This was because she knew that what Ren Baqin was going to talk about could really advance the development of Dayo, was the foundation of that world and was truly important. She was very happy that Ren Baqin was willing to teach these things to others. This was because she was the Empress of Dayo, and she would never only think about one family or one place. I have said before that I will make Dayo what you want it to be. Ren Baqin raised his cup from a distance and drank it. The Empress's eyes curved when she heard this. Ren Baqin took out a blue flower from his sleeve and placed it on the table. I see that many flowers have withered recently, but only this flower has been blooming all along. I feel that it is like you, it will never wither. When other flowers bloom, it will overshadow the others. When other flowers wither, it stands out. The Empress picked up the flower and looked at it. Then she pinned it on her clothes and said faintly, this flower's name is Qingyang. It will only wither during the cloudy season before it blooms again. When it withers, even the heavens can't bear to part with it, so they shed tears. And when it blooms again, the heavens will also show their happiness. Ren Baqin continued the Empress's words. He gave himself a thumbs up in his heart. Coaxing a girlfriend required strength. Seeing the Empress wrinkle her nose, Ren Baqin knew that she was very happy. This was a small action of hers. Wrinkling her nose meant that she was in a good mood and very cheerful. And raising her eyebrows meant that she wanted to kill someone. If the Empress was happy, he would also be very happy. Emotions were contagious, whether it was happiness or sadness. Looking at that exquisite face, which was still full of heroic spirit after letting go of her coldness, but also had a unique charm that was unique to her, Ren Baqin felt that if he could live for 200 years, he would definitely coax her for 176 years. Those 24 years were the days before him. Chapter 303. Ren Baqin looked at the people below him. They seemed to be much better than yesterday, and their attitudes were also much more respectful. Today we'll talk about physics. Ren Baqin said to everyone. Logically speaking, he should talk about the written language first, but he still felt that he should arouse everyone's interest first. After all, this wasn't Earth, and the Aboriginals didn't have the habit of studying. He had to let them maintain a certain level of interest in learning. Everyone below looked at him attentively. It seemed that the words he said yesterday had some effect. For the first lesson, let's talk about the motion of objects. Ren Baqin picked up a stone and placed it on the podium. Is this stone stationary or moving? It's still, someone answered immediately. Ren Baqin nodded, picked up the stone, and let it fall to the ground with a soft sound. Was the rock still or moving? We're falling. Answer whether it's stationary or moving. Ren Baqin emphasized. Sports. Can a rock move? Ren Baqin asked. Everyone was stunned when they heard this question. Could the stone move? Ren Baqin picked up the stone and moved it up and down with his hand. Is the stone still or moving now? What still is your hand? In that case. Ren Baqin loosened his grip again and let the stone fall to the ground. Is it stationary or moving? Teacher, the rock is falling down. The rock itself can't move, but it will move when it falls down. Tong Lan was the first to react. You're half right. You are sitting on a carriage or on the back of a horse. The horse is moving forward and everything around it is moving backward. Who's moving? You said the mount is moving? But you didn't move, but your mount and your position didn't change. Instead, everything around you is moving backwards. What I want to tell you is that stillness and movement are relative. This stone is in my hand and relative to my hand it is still. But compared to this classroom or all of you, this stone is moving. You fell from the sky. You didn't move but everything around you was moving. Mechanical motion is the most common motion in the universe. Everything in nature moves but it depends on what the reference is. Humans are born with a good nature. Their natures are alike but their habits differ. If one does not teach, one's nature will change. In the way of teaching, the most important thing is to be focused. In the past, Mencius's mother chose a neighbor. If you don't learn, you'll break the rules. Rinpoche used a piece of chalk to write Chinese characters on the blackboard. He wrote down the first 5 paragraphs of the 3-character classic, a total of 60 characters. Then he wrote the corresponding words of this world below each character. You have to write it all down and memorize it. Humans are just like that. Idiot. The character for Ji is a dot, a horizontal fold and a restrain. What is that thing of yours? Who is Mother Meng? Let me tell you a story called Mencius's mother moved 3 times. For today's homework, you must write these 30 words 10 times and hand them in tomorrow. Bring your own paper and pen. If you don't have it, just ask me. Answer me again. What's 6 plus 3? If you dare to say 11, I will kill you right now. Rinpoche roared with a ferocious look on his face. His hand was already touching the Type 81 rifle. A tall and sturdy young man looked around blankly, then his eyes lit up. 6 plus 3 is 8. Bang. Remember how to write each number from 1 to 10. Today's math homework. 2 plus 7 plus? For plus 9 equals? When Rinpoche was in school, he had thought of volunteering as a teacher after graduation to leave a memory for his life. However, he became addicted to Bilibili and threw this idea to the back of his mind. He didn't expect that he would become a new generation of assisting teachers in remote areas. This could be considered as fulfilling his original dream of volunteering as a teacher. Seeing that everyone had left the school, Rinpoche clutched his chest and felt that he was going to have a heart attack from anger. He remembered the news that he had seen in the past. Parents who accompanied their children to do homework were so angry that they suffered heart attacks and cerebral hemorrhages. What are you guys? I'm a total of 49 idiots. Sigh, let's take it slow. Rinpoche finally sighed, got the guards to tidy up the classroom, closed the school doors and returned to the palace. How was it? The Empress asked Rinpoche with a smile. Rinpoche hadn't returned to the palace yet, but the Empress already knew about his rant at the school. They are a little stupid but they can still be saved, Rinpoche said after thinking for a while. Although he was infuriated by those idiots just now, he knew that learning wasn't something that could be done in a day or two. The scene of his old teacher pointing at him and saying that he was a good-for-nothing was still vivid in his mind. He didn't want to easily deny the future of these people. The role of a gardener was to water the flowers so that the flowers could grow, bud, and finally bloom. The Empress nodded. It was good that Rinpoche could say this. After lunch, Rinpoche met a few people at Pingle Park. They were the shopkeepers of the 2 caravans in the palace. I have seen what you have done over the years and I can't say that it's good. Look at your list. This kind of sour wine actually costs 10 taels of silver for a jar? 30 taels of silver for a bolt of silk? Also, the final price of the things that you sell are far lower than the market price. If not for the fact that you have always been relatively honest, I would have suspected that you are secretly helping outsiders. Rinpoche patted the paper on the table and said, Sir Rin, it's not that we want to do this. It's just that they are buying our goods at low prices. If we don't sell them at low prices, we simply can't sell them. Also, we know that the prices of these goods are expensive, but we really have no choice. Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, the expressions of the 2 shopkeepers immediately turned ugly. They looked as if they had been wronged. If you really have any problems, you should know Her Majesty's temperament. As for me, you will know in the future. I will be in charge of this aspect in the future, and you have to report to me. I am different from Her Majesty. Her Majesty has too many things to worry about every day, and she can't be bothered with these things. I'm not that easy to talk to. If you do a good job, you will be rewarded. If you don't do a good job, you will be punished. I hope that all of you will do your part. Naturally, I will not treat you unfairly. Otherwise, think about the consequences. He didn't know whether these 2 shopkeepers were secretly helping outsiders. In any case, no matter how he looked at the list, there was something wrong. No matter what, he had to give them a warning first. The goods this year are different from the previous years. This year we have these two things. Rinpoche opened a box beside his feet, took out a goblet and a classical cup, and placed them on the table. Following which he took out two mirrors. Both of you take a look. How much can these things be sold for? These are cups. They are so clear and transparent. I wonder what material is used to make them. I think they can be sold for at least 500 taels of silver each. These mirrors are also different from copper mirrors. They are actually so clear. They will be sold for at least 1,000 taels of silver each. The two shopkeepers took a careful look at the cups one after another. Their faces revealed an astonished expression. The cups were completely transparent, and even the fine hairs on their faces could be seen clearly in the mirror. Rinpoche looked at the two of them carefully and asked, "Don't tell me you are spies sent by other countries?" "Sir." The two of them were shocked. These cups are sold for at least 5,000 taels of silver each. They are completely carved out of clear and transparent gemstones. You are telling me that these craftsmanship and materials are worth 500 taels of silver each? And this mirror, it is so clear and bright that it can reflect the scene perfectly. It will be sold for at least 30,000 taels of silver. One had to know that when Venice first produced mercury mirrors, they were still covered with tinfoil. At that time they already cost 150,000 French francs. Not to mention these mirrors with more perfect craftsmanship were worth 30,000 taels of silver. If not for the high production rate and the fact that glass would appear in many places in Dayo in a few years, he would have wanted to sell them as soon as possible to make a fortune. He even wanted to raise the price a little. "Sir, no one will accept this price," the two shopkeepers whispered. "Are you fools?" Rinpoche almost poked their heads with his finger. "There are many brothels in those two countries, right? Find the best brothel and give them a sum of money. Let their most popular courtesan hold 2 cups and auction them on the spot. The highest bidder wins. Let me tell you, brothels are the places with the most childs. They are also the places that can fetch the highest price. Sell a pair of cups in one place and then sell them in another city. The brothels are easy to deal with. Give them 1,000 taels of silver and all the money will go to us. Otherwise we can split the profits with them. If not, give them 500 taels of silver. During the auction, the starting price will be 5,000 taels of silver. We will give them the extra money. Do you think they will agree? Or you can find an influential child and give him a pair of cups. The request is nothing else but for him to introduce this item to others. When the time comes, you will give him a commission. For each cup that he sells, you will give him another 500 taels of silver. Once you have made a name for yourself, there will naturally be people who will take the initiative to buy it from you. As for this mirror, you have to remember this saying. Love lasts forever and the silver mirror will last forever. This mirror is the best token of love to give to your sweetheart. As for those who have been married before, what else in this world is more precious than a mirror that can reflect your own appearance? Men's mouths are all fake. Only this mirror will not lie to you. Rinpoche gave the two of them a sales lesson for 4 hours in a row, and both of them were dumbfounded after listening to him. Chapter 304. Remember who are our customers this time. It was the local tyrants, the officials, the aristocratic families, and the ambitious people. Why should we sell things to them? Because only they should have these things and they deserve to have them. Because only our things can highlight their identity and value. Only then can they show their nobility and only then can they get what they want. Whether it's for their own use, for their dream lover, or for their boss. Doesn't he want to have it? It doesn't matter, let his opponent have it first. For the next few days, Rinpoche would teach the disciples of the academy in the morning, practice boxing in the afternoon, or get beaten up by Tong Lan. At night, he would teach the two shopkeepers of the caravan whose heads were made of wood. What sales? Rinpoche sat on a stone chair in Pingle Park. The two shopkeepers, who were in their 40s or 50s, were standing obediently like primary school students. These few days had broadened their horizons. Solving the needs of our customers, the two shopkeepers immediately answered. How do we do sales? Create demand for our customers. Rinpoche nodded slightly. These two wooden heads could finally understand some logic. What's our product? It's our identity and value. People need to increase their value through external objects. The two shopkeepers were full of jargon. If the Empress were to see them, she would be shocked. Okay, remember, we aren't selling products, but identity. Self-expression. Well, high positions and generous salaries. The only thing we aren't selling is products, Rinpoche summarized for them. Yes, sir. The two nodded in unison with a look of conviction. They really didn't know where this man in front of them learned these things from. The two of them felt that they had benefited a lot from these few days of lessons. Now, even if they were given a pile of feces, they would sell it for the price of gold. You may leave. Memorize today's lessons well and set off in 2 days. Rinpoche waved his hand. Sir, we will record everything every day when we go back and compare it with each other, the two of them said respectfully. Well, when you do it, you will know what self-worth is. Rinpoche waved his hand to get the guards to send them out of the palace. After the two of them left, he felt a little regretful that the time was too short. Otherwise, he could have tried what a pyramid scheme was. Right now, they could only rely on what they had learned over the past few days. Fortunately, with his products, he didn't have any competitors, so he didn't have to worry. Even if there were some twists and turns, he believed that the two of them would give him a satisfactory answer. The goods he had prepared were 2,000 goblets, 2,000 vintage cups, and 1,000 silver mirrors. However, it wasn't all at once. Instead, it was divided into 4 trips. The first time, the quantity was the least, and the second time, the quantity gradually increased. Of course, the price was the highest for the first time, and then it gradually decreased. His goal was to earn more than 30 million taels of silver from Dayo and the Yun nation for this batch of goods. This was a huge sum of money for Dayo. Great Xia's annual treasury revenue was 100 million taels of silver, the Yun nation's treasury revenue was 31 million taels of silver, and the Qin nation's treasury revenue was 22 million taels of silver. As for Dayo, which was equivalent to the combined size of the Yun nation and the Qin nation, its annual treasury revenue was only 7 million taels of silver. Half of the income came from the remnant citizens of the Hao nation in the southern region. Out of these 7 million taels of silver, 3 million taels of silver would be spent on military expenses every year. For an army of 100,000, excluding food and some basic armaments, each soldier would only receive 12 taels of silver a year, which was equivalent to 1 tael of silver a month. One had to know that the weakest soldier in Dayo was at the manual level. In other countries, the same level of strength would receive at least 6 to 10 times the salary. It was no wonder that the protectorates of Dayo were reduced to relying on the income from brothels to supplement their income. As for the remaining 4 million taels of silver, it was used for the salaries of all the officials in Dayo, the monthly salaries of the craftsmen and odd-job workers, city repairs and so on. There was almost no surplus. As a result, Dayo basically didn't have any spare energy to build infrastructure. Even the official roads were only flattened with dirt. The imperial treasury had been buying weapons to replenish the army year after year, and basically didn't have much money left. The additional 8,000 taels of silver for cultivation had shrunk the empress's treasury by a large margin in 3 months. At most, it could only last for another 3 months. Rinpoche's monthly cultivation expenses were about 50,000 taels of silver. In other words, other than those rare and precious items, the empress's treasury only had 300,000 taels of silver. This included the gold, silver, and jewelry that were sent by people from other countries for this year's birthday celebration. Rinpoche carefully calculated the accounts and felt that it wasn't easy for the empress to be an empress. Fortunately, the empress was willing to do this and didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. The empress was probably the poorest among all the civilized countries on earth and in this world, with the exception of the African brothers. Even the empress was like this, let alone the ministers. Rinpoche pondered about the situation in Dayo for a while. Earning a sum of money would only solve the urgent situation. Dayo still had a long way to go. He put aside his thoughts and decided to take it step by step. Lying on the bed, he entered a spacious and empty space. In the entire space, there was only a towering tree in the middle. It was unknown how tall it was. The crown of the tree covered a radius of more than 10 kilometers and there were countless green vines twining around the trunk. This was the second visualization after breaking through the visualization of water, the visualization of wood. Water was related to wood. Therefore, after completing the visualization of water, he didn't need to visualize anything else and directly entered the visualization of wood. The 5 elements corresponded to the 5 internal organs. The visualization of water corresponded to the kidneys and the visualization of wood corresponded to the liver. Rinpoche's current practice was to climb up the tree trunk and vines. However, as long as he was more than 3 meters above the ground, the surrounding wind would blow like a storm from all directions, making it difficult for him to even breathe. His entire body had to cling to the tree trunk and vines with difficulty. While resisting the strong wind to stabilize his body, he climbed up bit by bit. When his strength was exhausted, he would be blown down and directly exit the visualization of wood. After a while, Rinpoche was blown down from a height of 5 meters. When he woke up, he was already back on the bed and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Rinpoche first took a medicinal bath and then went to Yangxin Palace Hall. Today was the school's day off. Rinpoche had brought the big week from Earth over. Previously, when the students had a break, Rinpoche took the opportunity to return to Earth to order some things. Today he and the Empress returned to Earth to collect them. These included the teaching materials that the students needed. Elementary school mathematics from grade 1 to grade 6, junior high school physics and chemistry materials, a volume of the 3-character classic, and some experimental materials. Originally, Rinpoche had considered the rules for disciples and the Analects of Confucius. However, after thinking about it, he gave up. This world was different from Earth, and the Aboriginals were different from ordinary people. The biggest difference was that the importance of martial arts in this world was much greater than that on Earth. Mechanically applying the words of Confucius might not necessarily be good. When Rinpoche walked into Yangxin Palace Hall, he saw a red shadow flashing and moving in the hall. At the same time, it was as if there was a strong wind blowing in the hall. Following every movement of the Empress, he could feel the strong wind blowing in the hall. Rinpoche took a closer look and realized that the Empress was practicing a set of boxing techniques that he didn't know the name of. Every time her fists struck out, there would be a loud sound of breaking the air. Rinpoche quietly watched from the side. Rather than saying that he was watching the Empress practice, it would be better to say that he was watching that figure. In any case, he couldn't understand the movements of the Empress. In fact, he couldn't even see them clearly. After a while, the Empress suddenly stopped moving. She slowly lowered both her hands. It was as though water vapor was spurting out from her palms and directly smashed onto the green tiles below. It was unknown what material the floor tiles of Yangxin Palace Hall were made of, but they actually didn't break. "How much do you understand?" The Empress turned and asked him. "You are indeed worthy of being called Your Majesty. I can't even see your movements clearly. However, I will try my best to keep up with Your Majesty's footsteps. In time, I might be able to see the mystery of Your Majesty's boxing technique." Rinpoche immediately gave her a thumbs up. The Empress stared at him and subconsciously gritted her teeth. Just now, she had deliberately slowed down her movements, but this bastard actually didn't see it at all. There is no need to wait for time. From today onwards, you will practice this boxing technique with me. The Empress snorted. "Your Majesty, we have changed our departure today. Previously we said that we are going to the amusement park." Rinpoche said with a smile. Ever since the Empress watched Final Destination 3, she couldn't forget about the amusement park. Chapter 306. In a room there were several computers. Each screen was divided into 9 screens, monitoring various locations in the neighborhood, including the elevator, the underground parking lot, and the entrance of the neighborhood. All the surveillance cameras in the neighborhood were connected to this place. However, this wasn't a surveillance room. It was a 3-bedroom house in the neighborhood. Because the curtains were drawn every day, strangers would come in and out from time to time. Someone thought that they were doing some illegal activities and called the police. When the police came yesterday, the people in the room were confused. They only sent the police away when someone took out their ID. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The people in the room were speechless when they thought about it. The residents of this neighborhood were almost as vigilant as the omnipotent Chaoyang people. "How do you think they found us?" A short-haired woman looked at the surveillance camera impatiently. They were originally watching the house opposite with binoculars. As long as the other party came back, they would find out. However, they suddenly found out that they were exposed. They moved here in a hurry and stared at the surveillance camera every day. Who knows? Don't forget the instructions from above. They aren't ordinary people. Another young man wearing glasses took out a cylindrical metal object and took a puff. Then he puffed out a large amount of smoke. After a few puffs, the room became like a fairyland. "This thing smells much better than your cigarette." The short-haired woman turned her head and said. The young man with glasses spread his hands. "I wanted to smoke. But since you had such a big reaction, I changed it to this. However, this electronic cigarette is not bad. It's much better than I thought." "You're sensible this time." The short-haired woman leaned on the table. "Last time, those 2 people suddenly appeared in the room. Is there really such a thing as a superpower in this world? Who should I ask? The boss might know." "You can ask the boss." The young man with glasses took out a glass bottle from the side and used a dropper to draw some solution on the electronic cigarette. Then he began to puff again. Looking at his intoxicated expression, it was obvious that he was smoking an electronic cigarette. Those who didn't know would think that he was smoking Diu. They're back. The woman quickly patted the young man with glasses. On the screen in the upper left corner, a person suddenly opened the window. It can't be a housekeeper, right? The young man looked at the screen. The angle was from the bottom up. He couldn't see the inside of the house, only the window. This was also to prevent the other party from discovering them again. No, this isn't the time for housekeeping, the short-haired woman said. After that, the two of them began to focus on the monitor. After the target appeared, the two of them had to constantly pay attention to when the other party left. If it was before, it would be fine. They could just use the binoculars to see when the person in the room left, but now they had to constantly stare at the surveillance camera. No wonder she looked so unwilling. Why do you think we're watching them? The short-haired woman still couldn't figure out the problem. Her previous missions all had a mission objective, and she knew what she had to do. But this time he didn't do anything at all. He just kept an eye on them and reported their itinerary. It had already been a few months and there were still no orders from above. You can ask boss, I don't know. Of course, Rinpoche didn't know that the last time he cheated them, the two of them had to stay in a small room for more than 20 days and were full of resentment. He pushed open the window. The weather today was pretty good. Earth had already entered the beginning of May. The weather during the day was over 20 degrees, and the sun was shining brightly. It was a good time to go out and play. When he opened the window and turned around, he heard the sound of the door closing. The Empress had gone to change her clothes. She didn't even eat her ice cream. From this, it could be seen how impatient the Empress was. It was hard to imagine why the Empress was so interested in the amusement park. By the time he went upstairs and changed into a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, the Empress had already changed into a dress and was sitting on the sofa eating ice cream. Sure enough, to the Empress, eating was something that couldn't be neglected. It was just a matter of time. Let's go to the amusement park. Rinpoche snapped his fingers and the Empress threw a pillow at his face. I feel that action isn't very respectful. The Empress nibbled on the ice cream and looked at him from the corner of her eyes. How can that be? It's just an action to emphasize my tone. For example, eat your fill. Rinpoche snapped his fingers again and another pillow was thrown at his face. Your Majesty, it's time to set off. Rinpoche stretched out his right hand, held 3 of the Empress's fingers and bent down. Not bad. The Empress was very satisfied. She helped him tidy up the hat on the back of his head. Her fingers were clean again. Otherwise, the melted ice cream would be sticky on her fingers. When they went out, the elevator stopped at the 7th floor. A young girl came in and was surprised to see the two of them. Then she bowed to them. Thank you for that time. The girl thanked him. Even though she went to look for Rinpoche and wanted to treat him to a meal, she was rejected. Now, when she thought about the fire incident, she still felt a lingering fear. Therefore, when she saw Rinpoche, she immediately expressed her gratitude. Coincidentally, the collar of the girl's shirt was quite big. Rinpoche naturally took a glance. Pow! The Empress slapped Rinpoche's nose. Ouch! Rinpoche groaned in pain and covered his nose. The Empress didn't even look at him from the side. How did she know? His nose was a little wet. When he stretched out his hand to touch it, there was a smear of red. There was really blood flowing down. Rinpoche quickly raised his head, took out a roll of money from his pocket, and stuffed it into his nose. Why did you hit me? Rinpoche stuffed his nose and spoke in a muffled voice. Just now, he clearly saw that the Empress didn't even turn her head to look at him. Intuition. The Empress turned her head and looked at Rinpoche. Rinpoche, Your Majesty, you have definitely watched too many Final Destination movies. You just wanted to hit me all of a sudden, right? In any case, it didn't matter if you hit me indiscriminately. Even if you hit me wrongly, it would be in vain. When the girl saw the two of them covering their mouths and giggling softly, she saw Rinpoche glaring at her and quickly said softly, Sorry, I couldn't help it. When Rinpoche walked out of the elevator, he took a glance at the acrylic mirror at the side. There was a roll of money stuck in his nose like an elephant, but it was a pity that it wasn't very symmetrical. The two of them drove all the way to the amusement park, which was the largest amusement park in Shurching. From outside, they could hear the rumbling and screams of the roller coaster inside. The Empress's attention was immediately attracted by it. That's the one. The Empress's eyes lit up. It seemed like Final Destination 3 had really left a deep impression on her. Even when she came to the amusement park, she went straight for the roller coaster. It was unknown if it was because the weather was too good, but there were people everywhere. Many of them were parents with their children, and there were also pairs of couples. Chapter 307. Even though the amusement park wasn't crowded, there were still quite a lot of people. In particular, there were more people in front of the roller coaster. After all, there weren't many things for adults to play in this amusement park. The two of them queued for more than half an hour. The Empress was eating ice cream as if nothing had happened while Rinpoche was playing with his phone with one hand and holding the Empress with the other. "Will there be any problems?" the Empress suddenly asked. Rinpoche looked at the Empress and had a bad premonition. Normally, the probability of a roller coaster malfunctioning was similar to that of a plane crashing down. However, the Empress couldn't forget the performance of the Return of the Grim Reaper and suddenly said these words. He was afraid that even if there weren't any problems, she would still create problems. A certain great man once said, "If there are difficulties, you have to face them. If there aren't any difficulties, you have to create them." The Empress couldn't possibly be doing this to satisfy the excitement of imitating a movie, right? "Actually, I have a fear of heights. I will wait for you below." Rinpoche saw that the people in front had already started to enter. After saying this, he turned around and was ready to stop the roller coaster at any time. The Empress moved faster than him and grabbed his collar. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't escape. "Are you going to leave me alone?" the Empress asked. She pointed to the surroundings and saw that there were only two people in pairs. Then she looked at the last bit of egg roll in her hand reluctantly and threw it into her mouth. "If I don't go up, they will thank me," Rinpoche whispered in a serious tone. The Empress didn't say a word. She dragged him forward and conveniently rubbed against his clothes. Rinpoche was shocked when he saw her reaction. Had he guessed correctly? "Are you serious?" However, he didn't dare to shout. Feeling the strength of the Empress pulling his collar, he grabbed the railing at the side. "I won't go up even if you beat me to death." The surrounding people looked at the two of them and found it funny. This man was too timid. If his girlfriend was so beautiful, he wouldn't even bat an eyelid even if he went up a mountain of knives or a sea of fire, let alone riding a roller coaster. However, this woman's hands were so strong that the man's fingers turned white as he held onto the railing. Then the Empress poked Rinpoche's lower back. Rinpoche finally quietened down. His entire body went limp and he couldn't exert any strength at all. After fastening his seatbelt and pressing down on the U-shaped seatbelt, he finally regained some strength. He looked at the Empress nervously and whispered, "They are all ordinary people. If something happens, it will be a big problem." The Empress turned to look at him with a smile that was as beautiful as a flower. "It's okay, I'll be gentle." Rinpoche was about to spit out blood. Anything that happened on the roller coaster would be a big deal. What was the use of being gentle? These words were not comforting at all. Rinpoche observed 3 minutes of silence for the people on the roller coaster and hoped that nothing serious would happen later on. Following the ringing of the bell, the roller coaster began to move forward slowly, and Rinpoche's heart began to race. At first it was still all right. The speed was very slow and it kept moving upwards. Rinpoche felt a little dizzy looking at the ground below him. Rinpoche's heart began to beat faster as the roller coaster rapidly descended. As the roller coaster moved at a high speed, it made a 360-degree turn in the air from time to time. Rinpoche gripped the seat belt tightly and let out a miserable howl. Ah dash! Bang! Rinpoche suddenly heard such a sound. Before he could react, his entire body began to lose gravity. If it wasn't for the fact that he was still holding onto the seat belt with both hands, he would have been flung out. However, the seat belt was now being lifted up. *CK. Rinpoche was really howling this time around. Help! His miserable howl could cover half of the amusement park. He thought that the Empress would tamper with the roller coaster, but he didn't expect her to tamper with his seat belt. Fortunately, the Empress's small hand grabbed onto Rinpoche's clothes at the waist, which made him feel relieved. Then the Empress actually let go. She let go. She let go. Rinpoche was going crazy. She was trying to murder her husband. At this moment, the seat belt was completely unbuckled, and the seat belt on his body was also broken. Rinpoche held onto the seat belt tightly and looked like a kite fluttering in the wind. Then, the Empress suddenly extended her arm and grabbed his wrist, making him feel a little safer. However, at the same time, the Empress's other hand gently knocked on the seat belt, and the metal seat belt immediately broke. Rinpoche held onto the broken seat belt with both hands and was fluttering in the wind while being held by the Empress. Rinpoche's howl became even more miserable. At the same time, many people below also realized that there was a problem with the roller coaster, and many people cried out in alarm. In the eyes of outsiders, the boyfriend's seat belt broke, and his girlfriend held onto him tightly without letting go. Such a scene that always appeared in movies appeared in front of everyone's eyes. How touching was this scene? Many people below took out their phones and started to take pictures. At the same time, they felt that they had no regrets in life with such a girlfriend. However, at this moment, Rinpoche even had the intention to kill someone. At this moment, the roller coaster's controller realized that there was a problem and hurriedly slowed down and stopped the roller coaster. Then everyone was hung in the sky. However, Rinpoche was especially miserable at this moment. One of his hands was tightly held by the Empress, and the other hand was tightly holding onto the body of the car. With more than 600 kilograms of strength, the car was almost out of shape, but he didn't let go at all. Finally, he was rescued with great difficulty, and Rinpoche was about to go crazy from anger. Although he had the strength to ensure that even if the seat belt was unbuckled, he would still be able to hold onto the shoulder straps and not fall, but he couldn't play like this. He had acrophobia. "Sir, I'm really sorry. Do you want to go to the hospital first? The person in charge is on the way here." A staff member at the side hurriedly came forward to welcome him. "Ignore me." Rinpoche's face was full of irritation. Even a clay figurine would have some anger. Rinpoche felt that he needed to express his attitude. Ever since he was rescued, he had been putting on a straight face. After the Empress came down, he didn't look at her and only said, "I don't want to play anymore. Let's go back." Even a blind person could hear the coldness and resentment in his voice. It's indeed meaningless. The Empress propped her chin with one finger and turned her head to look at her surroundings. This roller coaster was more boring than she had imagined, but she still wanted to go to some other places to play. However, seeing Rinpoche's completely different tone, she first blinked her eyes and then looked pensive. There were actually many people at the side who applauded the Empress and praised her for holding on to her boyfriend tightly and not letting go. Rinpoche felt even more depressed. After the two of them walked for a while, the Empress's cold and puzzled voice sounded, "Are you angry?" "Very angry." Rinpoche lowered his head to look for money on the ground and didn't look at her. "Look at me." The Empress grabbed his arm. Rinpoche turned his head to the other side. Then a soft hand pulled his chin back. The Empress's eyes were always bright, clear and pure like a lake, but at this moment, they were somewhat flickering. Looking at the resentment on Rinpoche's face, the Empress blinked her eyes and pulled Rinpoche's face closer to her. She kissed him. It was a little cold, very soft, and had an alluring fragrance. Rinpoche felt his heart beating like a pile driver. Thump, thump, thump. What kind of situation was this? Rinpoche's eyes widened. The Empress blushed from her ears to her face. She lowered her head slightly and didn't look at his eyes. Her eyes were filled with embarrassment. Cough cough. Since you already know your mistake and have reflected deeply on it, let's go for another spin. Rinpoche suddenly felt that it was just a roller coaster. It wasn't impossible to consider going for another more exciting ride. Chapter 308. Ah! An earth-shattering scream was heard from the drop-off machine in the amusement park. When the drop-off machine was rapidly descending, a man's seatbelt suddenly broke and he almost fell off. Fortunately, the lady beside him caught him. Not only was the man screaming, but the other people on the drop-off machine were also screaming, and their screams were even louder. After all, everyone's hearts were about to jump out of their chests when something like that happened around them. When the drop-off machine landed, everyone ran off as if they were running for their lives. The long queue instantly retreated a few meters. Who would dare to do such a thing after such a thing happened? Rinpoche was sweating profusely. Even though he knew that the Empress would catch him, his heart was still in turmoil. "Sir, are you all right?" The staff hurriedly ran up to him. "I'm all right? I don't look like I'm all right. Don't worry about me. I'll take a rest." Rinpoche felt his legs turn to jelly. At this moment, not only did Rinpoche's legs turn to jelly, but the staff at the amusement park also felt their legs turn to jelly. Such an incident had just happened on the roller coaster, and the roller coaster was still under maintenance. They didn't know how long it would take before it could run again. Now, such an incident had happened to the drop-off machine. Seeing that the two people had left without a word, the staff couldn't possibly stop them. No matter how these two people were going to cause trouble for the amusement park in the future, it was the responsibility of the person in charge. Furthermore, who knew if these two people were going to make a phone call to cause trouble now? When the person in charge of the amusement park rushed over and saw the person on the surveillance camera, he was confused at first, and then his expression changed. Previously, this was the person who had an accident on the roller coaster. Now it was him again. How could it be such a coincidence? Furthermore, the cause of the accident was the same. The seatbelt had broken. And both times he didn't want any compensation, not even an examination. He just left without saying a word. He wouldn't believe that these two people were alright even if he was beaten to death. However, how did the seatbelt break? One had to know that the seatbelt wasn't made of nylon rope, but metal, and it couldn't be broken by humans. Could it be that these two people were really a coincidence? The person in charge now had a balance in his heart. On one side, the two people were here to cause trouble, and on the other side it was really a coincidence. At this moment, both ends of the balance were constantly moving up and down. One moment, the left side was tilted, and the next moment, the right side was tilted. Rinpoche looked at the Empress with a do-as-you-see-fit expression on his face. The Empress lowered her head and hesitated for a long time. She then used the tip of her foot to rub against the ground. Finally, she created a hole in the ground. Then he gritted his teeth, raised his head, and moved toward Rinpoche. Oh. Last time there was still a little feeling, but this time not only did he not feel any charm or softness, he only felt sore and numb, and tears were about to come out. He didn't know if it was intentional or not, but the Empress's nose directly bumped into his. It looked like a light bump, but the strength of the Empress's body was comparable to that of steel. She didn't feel anything at all. Rinpoche immediately covered his nose and tears welled up in his eyes. His nose was bleeding like tap water. A moment later, Rinpoche stuffed 100 yuan bill into each of his nostrils and looked at the Empress with bright eyes. He made up his mind and kissed her. This time the Empress wouldn't seriously injure him, right? As the saying goes, first time unfamiliar, second time familiar. Then, the Empress raised her chin slightly, and the two red ivory tusks that protruded from the nose directly poked the Empress's face. Rinpoche covered his nose again, and this time his tears really came out. This was the first time he knew how painful it was to have money stuck in his nose. I think I need to go to the hospital. At this moment, Rinpoche's eyes were brimming with tears. He pulled the money out and threw it aside. His nose was extremely painful. Previously, it was only the bridge of his nose that hurt, but this time, it was the inside of his nose that hurt. He suspected that if he used more strength, the two bills would poke into his brain. At that time, his brain would really be filled with money. Seeing that Rinpoche was really crying this time, the Empress blushed shyly and leaned over to give him a light peck on his lips. The blood that flowed from Rinpoche's lips also stained her red lips. The Empress stuck out her tongue and gently licked her lips. Her face became even redder. Feeling the softness that he had just touched and looking at the Empress's actions, Rinpoche suddenly felt that he could actually persevere for a little longer. Let's go to the overturning seas and rivers. Rinpoche pinched his nose and pointed into the distance. It was just like when he pointed to the distance and said, "Our journey is in the sea of stars." In his heart, he inexplicably thought of a famous musician who once said very artistic words. Life isn't just about the present, there are also poems and beautiful women. The overturning seas and rivers was also a large-scale amusement park. There was a rack that was 20 meters tall, and when people sat on it, they would be lifted up to a height of tens of meters. Then they would rotate 720 degrees in the air for 2 rounds before being lifted up to another direction and rotated 720 degrees for 2 rounds. The excitement wasn't any less than that of a jump tower. One had to know that it was a 720-degree rotation from a height of 20 to 30 meters. Rinpoche felt that he had already given it his all today. However, the others didn't want him to give it his all. When the two of them arrived at the overturning seas and rivers amusement park, they realized that there wasn't a single queue in front of them. After all, there had already been 2 incidents at the amusement park today. How stupid would they have to be to continue playing such a dangerous attraction? Then the staff member looked at Rinpoche, who had unwiped bloodstains on his face and body as if he had run from the scene of a car accident. All the large-scale attractions have been closed for inspection today. Closed for inspection? There's no other way. We can't play anymore. Rinpoche didn't know if he should feel regret or rejoice. However, 2 incidents had happened consecutively. Even if the boss of the amusement park was a fool, he would still conduct an inspection. The Empress furrowed her eyebrows and was a little dissatisfied. The previous 2 incidents weren't very fun. Initially, when she looked at this amusement park from afar, she felt that it would be more fun than the previous 2. After the 2 of them left, the person in charge heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the news. Just now, when he heard that the 2 of them were heading towards the overturning seas and rivers, he immediately asked someone to stop the equipment. He couldn't stop the equipment even if he didn't. After the previous 2 incidents, no one dared to play today. At the same time, he was certain that the 2 of them were definitely here to cause trouble. It was a pity that he didn't have any evidence. Otherwise he would definitely teach them a lesson. However, he was also somewhat puzzled. If the other party was here to cause trouble, why didn't they take the opportunity to blow things up and not ask for any compensation? Furthermore, the two safety belts weren't cut off by someone. Instead, they seemed to have been cut off normally. The cut wasn't neat. These 2 points were what he couldn't understand. In any case, the reputation of the amusement park would definitely be tarnished this time. If these 2 incidents were to spread, it was unknown how many customers would be lost. At the very least, it would definitely be greatly affected before this incident was put to rest. Rinpoche and the Empress returned to the car. Rinpoche looked at the Empress beside him and had the urge to turn his head and kiss her. This was probably the meaning of the phrase, tasting the marrow. In particular, the previous 2 incidents were like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. He really wanted to have a good taste of it. Unfortunately, the Empress didn't know if she knew what he was thinking. She raised her hand and was ready to slap Rinpoche's face at any time. Of course, if she really wanted to slap him, Rinpoche wouldn't be able to react in time. This action of hers was more of a deterrent than anything else. Rinpoche grabbed her hand, put it in front of his nose, sniffed it and gently kissed her fingers. The Empress's ears turned red again. Then she bashfully and flirtatiously slapped Rinpoche's nose. "Let's change the location next time," Rinpoche said with tears in his eyes as he fumbled to find a tissue to stuff his nose. A while ago she was a thug. Why did she change to slap his nose today? Your Majesty, where did you learn this from? P.S. Recommending a friend's new book, Little Cultivation Streamer. In an era when the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was scarce, cultivators had already gone into hiding. On a certain live streaming platform, a masked male streamer appeared. He would lead the netizens to unveil the mysterious veil of the cultivation world step by step. Thank you to Kunlun Mountain for the rocket. Thank you to Kong Tong Sect for the plane. Let's go 666 again. I'm going to perform my physical body to withstand the lightning tribulation. Chapter 309. After Rinpoche and the Empress left the amusement park, they found a place to have a meal. The place was quite exquisite. Halfway through their meal, they heard the sound of an eru coming from outside. It was played with a loud sound system. The tune was very familiar and Rinpoche almost sang along. Back then you wanted to separate, so we separated. Rinpoche was shocked. This was a divine tune. He turned around and saw a man dragging a small cart with a sound system. He was holding an eru in his hand and was playing it at the entrance of the restaurant. Rinpoche's musical heart was immediately ignited. He recalled his eru that had been miserably suppressed. It was a sunny afternoon. Rinpoche followed the owner of the restaurant out to deal with that man and threw 100 yuan to him. "Lend me a tune. Unplug the sound system, it's too noisy." Then he took that man's eru and sat at the side to tune it. Previously, when that man was playing the eru at the entrance of the restaurant with a sound system, everyone knew what was going on and felt disgusted. However, at this time, they saw that it was a clean and handsome young man tuning there. Many people also saw that he had given that person 100 yuan, so they immediately became interested. After all, in this city there weren't many street performances like this. The Empress sat by the window and watched Rinpoche holding the thing from last time. She was a little curious. After all, that man wasn't playing that badly. She wondered what Rinpoche was going to do this time. After Rinpoche was done tuning, he began to play the eru with an intoxicated look on his face. The tune of Psychopath's song flowed out along with the horizontal movements of his hands. The tune was very cheerful. Even though the passers-by couldn't tell what tune it was, it sounded pretty good. Many people stopped to watch. 10 seconds later, the tune started to sound a little weird and then the style changed. A few short noises came out of his hands, like an old hen or an owl laughing at you. The crowd, who originally thought it was pretty good, was caught off guard by this sudden change in style. They were dumbfounded. What was going on? Then they saw Rinpoche's hands fluttering left and right. The crowd seemed to see an old hen flapping its wings and laughing at them non-stop. It was the kind of laughter that ridiculed them. Everyone felt that they were being ridiculed. They were being ridiculed by an eru spirit, who said that humans couldn't become spirits after the founding of the People's Republic. "Stand up and I promise I won't kill you." Everyone could hear the mockery in that voice. Those who stopped to listen to him play the eru were definitely not anxious people, nor were they in a bad mood. But when Su, who was originally in a good mood, heard this, his mood instantly turned sour. More than half of them raised their middle fingers and left. The Empress covered her forehead with her hand, and the veins on her forehead were bulging. She made up her mind to never let him touch this thing again. The other guests were also speechless. When Rinpoche was finally done, the boss immediately whispered, "Brother, tell me if you're not satisfied with the food. There's no need to do this." Rinpoche's face turned black. Is it that unpleasant? He felt pretty good about himself. She was already half as good as Wuxia on Bilibili. Forget it, you can have it. Rinpoche passed the eru to the person from before. That person received the eru with a dumbfounded look on his face. He felt that he was pretty awesome. No matter who he played that piece of music in front of their house, they would gladly pay for it. He didn't expect that there would always be someone stronger than him. He respectfully handed the 100 yuan to Rinpoche with both hands and said, "Brother, I can't accept this money. Although I'm in this line of work, I know my limits. Brother, please tell me the name of that piece of music and where I can find the score." Rinpoche gave him a thumbs up. He was indeed knowledgeable. He whispered the name into that person's ear, then turned around and entered the restaurant with a carefree look on his face. With a wave of his sleeves, he didn't take away a single cloud. He left behind a bunch of complicated and incomprehensible gazes. The kind that wanted to use a brick to slap him. "Your Majesty, I'll go buy another eru later," Rinpoche said as he sat down. He felt that his pursuit of music shouldn't stop just like that. Everyone had to have dreams. Music is my dream. No way. The Empress immediately smashed a piece of the table with her palm. The boss saw this scene as soon as he came in and felt like crying. Were these two people here to cause trouble? "If you touch that thing again." The Empress hesitated for a while and gritted her teeth. "I'll tie you up in the plaza to accompany the one who buried you last time." Rinpoche felt that his dream had died prematurely. As soon as he left the restaurant, Rinpoche received a call from his mother. "Mom." Rinpoche's face was beaming. After chatting with his mother for a while, she whispered, "Something happened to your brother. Can you find someone to help him?" "What's wrong? What happened?" Rinpoche frowned. "It's like this. Wan Yin got into a fight with someone. Nothing serious happened to both parties, but the other party is unwilling to let him go and refuses to come out of the hospital. We are paying for the medical fees, so it doesn't matter. However, they went to the school and are now punishing Wan Yin." "Why would the school punish Wan Yin for a fight between two people?" Rinpoche was puzzled. The other party said some nasty words and Wan Yin made the first move. After the fight, Wan Yin's nose was broken and his face was swollen, but he didn't take it seriously. However, that kid was smart and went straight to the hospital and refused to come out. The doctor said that he was fine, but he kept saying that he was in pain. I saw that his family was quite picky and thought that he should just stay in the hospital. Our family doesn't lack this bit of money anyway. Then the other party's family asked for 100,000 yuan to settle the matter privately. Given your father's character, how could he agree? Wan Yin is not to be blamed. Then the other party went to the school. After all, Wan Yin was the one who made the first move, and now the school wants to punish him. I thought that since you have a job now, you should know some people and see if there are any solutions. I got it. Don't worry, it's fine. Rinpoche comforted her. Don't worry about this matter. I will find someone to handle it. There will definitely be no problem. I will give Wan Yin a call first. Rinpoche hung up the phone and immediately called Rinpoche. Brother. Rinpoche's voice sounded normal. What's going on? Rinpoche asked. Some parts of what his mother said just now were unclear, and it was Rinpoche who explained it clearly. It's nothing. I just got into a fight with someone, but his mouth is cheap. Rinpoche was a little indignant. What did he say? Rinpoche asked curiously. That time, didn't you post a photo on your WeChat moments with a picture of sister-in-law? My roommate saw it. That day, I told others that sister-in-law is very beautiful, but they didn't believe me. So I showed it to them. In the end, that idiot's mouth was cheap and unpleasant, so I got into a fight with him. What did he say? Rinpoche's face was calm, but this time, his voice was much deeper. He said, brother, that you are a taker. If sister-in-law doesn't look for a taker, she won't be able to live in an ordinary family. I scolded him a little, and he said that she is your sister-in-law now, but she might be someone else's wife in the future. Then I got into a fight with him. Why did you get into a fight over such a trivial matter? Tell me about this next time. Alright, I got it. You don't have to worry about the school and that family. Send me the name of the hospital that guy is in. I will find someone to arrange it for you. Rinpoche hung up the phone after he finished speaking. As for why the school didn't punish that guy but Rinpoche, he didn't want to ask. What's a taker? The Empress turned and asked. Nothing. Rinpoche shook his head. I have to go to Quan City tonight. Chapter 310. Ren Wanyin studied at Lu Province University, which was located in Quan City. It was a quick flight from Shanqing and he arrived that night. He didn't greet anyone and immediately slept in the hotel. Early the next morning, Ren Baqin went to the bank to withdraw 700,000 yuan and put it into 2 Adidas sports bags that he bought by the roadside. When he withdrew the money, everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the 2 bags. He went to the hospital and found the ward according to the address. He heard the person inside saying, "Let's see if they want money or punishment. Don't worry, this matter isn't over. They even beat people up. Don't you have any respect for the laws?" Ren Baqin pushed the door open and went in without saying a word. He saw a young man lying on the bed with a face full of pimples. There was a man and 2 women sitting beside him. One of the men and one of the women was older, about 50 years old. The other woman was about 30 years old and was well dressed. The voice he heard just now was younger and should belong to this woman. These people all looked similar and seemed to be from the same family. "Are you his family?" Ren Baqin closed the door after the empress came in. They were puzzled when they saw a man and a woman come in. The man looked ordinary, but the woman was really beautiful. Although she looked cold, she was more beautiful than the celebrities on TV. "You are?" The woman in her 30s asked. "It's them? That's Ren Wanyin's brother. I saw him on his phone." The young man on the bed, Lu Man, immediately shouted. However, he didn't recognize Ren Baqin but the empress. Upon hearing this, their expressions turned ugly. The woman in her 30s raised her eyebrows. "Your brother beat up my brother like this. I won't let this matter rest until you give me an explanation." "It seems like you are his family?" Ren Baqin nodded. "I'm his father. What do you want?" The man in his 50s immediately stood up and said in a gruff voice. "That's easy. Don't you want compensation? Here." Ren Baqin threw the 2 bags on the ground. "Who are you trying to scare? Let me tell you, this isn't a matter of money. How did your family educate you? How can you beat people up so casually? Now that you're beating up your classmates in school, are you going to kill people in the future?" Lu Man's sister rolled her eyes around the 2 bags and immediately shouted. Previously they had only asked for 100,000 yuan. How much could these 2 bags contain? It could hold at least 1.8 million. Therefore it was definitely not money. Ren Baqin squatted down and pulled open the zipper, revealing stacks of cash inside. "It doesn't matter whether it's about money or not. Here was 700,000. This was the amount of compensation for a normal death. I don't like the way he talks. The 700,000 yuan was used to buy his tongue. Come to think of it, you guys have profited," Ren Baqin said faintly. As soon as he said that, the few of them were immediately pissed off. Lu Man's sister stood up and scolded, "What do you mean? Who are you trying to scare? Do you think I won't call the police? From top to bottom, your whole family is nothing." As he spoke, he took out his phone. Ren Baqin nodded. "I'm going out for a while. If you guys want to call the police, just do so. I'll be back in a while." After finishing his sentence, he opened the door and left with the empress. After Ren Baqin left, Lu Man's sister was still scolding him. She took out a stack of cash from her bag and said, "Who are you trying to scare with toy money?" Halfway through her sentence, she couldn't continue. The money in her hand looked real no matter how she looked at it. She shone it under the sun. It wasn't toy money at all. It was real money no matter how she looked at it. "What's wrong?" Papa Lu asked when he saw that her actions and expression weren't right. "This money seems to be real." Lu Man's sister whispered. "That's impossible. How much is so much money?" Papa Lu was shocked and quickly came over with Mama Lu to check. They looked at a few stacks in a row and each stack was filled with real money. This time the 2 of them were also shocked. "It's real money. How much is there?" "I'm afraid there's more than the 700,000 yuan that he mentioned," Lu Man's sister whispered. "What is he going to do with so much money?" The few of them were shocked. Even Lu Man, who was lying on the bed, was shocked. She rolled out of bed, went forward to take the 2 stacks of money, and found that they were all real. This time everyone was scared out of their wits. "What is he going to do? Why don't we call the police?" Mama Lu whispered. Papa Lu's face began to change. "Didn't you say that his family is just an ordinary person?" Lu Man's sister turned her head and looked at Lu Man, feeling a little apprehensive. If she didn't know that Ren Baqin's family was an ordinary person, she wouldn't have dared to do this. His brother seems to be the only one in his family. The one just now is a businessman and has some money. Lu Man also looked perturbed. These people were all ordinary people and at most they were a little unruly in their hometown. However, they were shocked when they suddenly encountered someone who threw 700,000 yuan on the ground and left. Even Lu Man's sister only had a few million yuan. After deducting the two houses, she only had a few 100,000 yuan in her hands, and most of it was in the stock market. Ren Baqian knew a few people in school and other places. He seemed to be powerful to his family, but that was all. Ren Baqian's actions gave them a fright. Lu Man's sister looked uncertain. She clenched her teeth and said, "Let's wait and see what he has to say. Don't touch the money." After more than half an hour, Ren Baqian pushed the door open again. Without waiting for them to speak, he directly pulled open the two bags, revealing the stacks of money inside, and threw the bags on the ground. Bang! Two consecutive sounds made their hearts skip a beat. "This is still 700,000 yuan. I don't really like what you said. I will give you 700,000 yuan and you will give me your tongue. You won't lose out." Ren Baqian pointed at Lu Man's sister. Lu Man's sister immediately exploded. "So what if you have some money? I will call the police now and see what you have to say when the police arrive. Who are you trying to scare with more than 1,000,000 yuan? Look, I'm a fair person. Usually the compensation for a death is only 700,000 yuan. I will take the compensation for 2 deaths and only want 2 tongues. Think about it yourself. Do you want to do it yourself or let me do it? If I do it, it might hurt a little and the wound won't look so good. I will give you a day to think about it. I will come back tomorrow." Ren Baqian's face was calm and his tone was very gentle. "You can take the money. It will be yours sooner or later. Don't go, I will call the police now." Lu Man's sister immediately dialed the police number. "Whatever. Do you think the police will arrest me when they arrive?" Ren Baqian's expression finally changed and he looked a little amused. "Do you think you can do whatever you want just because you have some money? This is a society ruled by law." Lu Man's father, who was a wicked and troublesome person in everyone's eyes, was so flustered that he even brought the police into the picture. As for Lu Man and Mama Lu, they had long been frightened, and their faces were deathly pale. One had to know that someone who could throw away more than 1,000,000 yuan and threaten to buy tongues without batting an eyelid was definitely not an ordinary person. Even if the police arrested him in the end, they would still suffer a loss. Moreover, Ren Baqian's calm appearance was even more frightening. They had a feeling that they were in big trouble this time. Lu Man was extremely regretful. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have caused so much trouble. Why did she have to be so shameless in the first place? Even if they had a fight, why did she cause so much trouble? At the same time, she felt a little resentful toward her father and sister. If they hadn't kept saying that this matter wasn't over, she wouldn't have done it. Ren Baqian revealed a kind and slightly bashful smile. "Someone asked me the same thing the last time. Look, I'm still standing here, which means that I can really do whatever I want." Chapter 311. The moment Ren Baqian left the hospital, those people immediately exploded. The 4 bags were filled with money. There was a total of 1.4 million yuan in them. How could an ordinary person do such a thing and say such things? How could he be easy to deal with? Lu Man's face was pale and she was dumbfounded. "What should we do, Xiaoqing? What do you think we should do?" Mama Lu was frightened and didn't know what to do. Lu Man's sister, Lu Qing, was pale, but she still managed to maintain her composure in front of her family. "Mom, don't say anything first. Let me make a few phone calls." Then she made a phone call and explained the situation. As for the cause and effect of the incident, she naturally sided with her family. However, she told them about Ren Baqian's attitude and the 1.4 million yuan. The person on the other end of the phone call was a grassroots cadre. He usually had some authority, but he wasn't stupid. He knew that this was a thorny matter and anyone who got involved would be jumping into a fire pit. How could someone dare to do such a thing without some backing? Even if it was a relative who encountered such a thing, they would avoid it as far as possible, let alone Lu Qing. After half a minute of silence, he said, "I can't help you with this matter. It's better for you to apologize to the other party." After saying that, he hung up the phone. Lu Qing's face was gloomy. Apologize and admit her mistake? Should she apologize and admit her mistake just because the other party threatened her? Was there still any law in this world? Judging from the other party's current behavior, he definitely wasn't an ordinary person. However, she wasn't resigned to it. Before she could make a second call, the door of the hospital room was pushed open again. 2 young men came in. "We are from the security department." "What did the person who came in just now say?" the 2 men asked after scanning the room. "Security department?" The few of them were baffled. What was the security department? "Here are our documents. We need your help." Tell us everything that the person said and did just now. The two men took out their documents from their pockets, opened them and waved them in place. Although Rinpoche was very important, his family wasn't closely monitored. After all, they had limited manpower and couldn't possibly use it on unrelated people. They only collected information on them from time to time. This time, before they could react, Rinpoche had already killed his way to Quan City. Only then did they realize that something had happened. After understanding part of the situation through some channels and knowing that Rinpoche had just withdrawn 1.4 million yuan, they felt that something big was going to happen. As such, they directly went to the hospital to look for the person involved. Rinpoche had just left when the two of them came in. Let me see. Lu Qing took a few steps forward and took the ID. When she saw that it was actually a square head, she was immediately shocked. Then his eyes lit up. Could it be that this person had committed some crime and was being targeted by the National Department? That person's behavior was not surprising at all. It was as if he had met his savior. You guys came at the right time. That person threatened us just now. He scared me to death. I thought there was no longer any law in this world. What did he say? The two men frowned slightly. They had a rough understanding of the situation. Some of them blamed the Lu family for being meddlesome. If it wasn't for them, how could they have caused such trouble? He now had a certain understanding of the two's personalities. No matter how his personality became like this, one thing was for sure. He was extremely troublesome. Lu Qing poured out Rinpoche's words like beans pouring out of a bamboo tube. She also added oil and vinegar at the same time. She was extremely skilled at doing this. Papa Lu also added in from time to time. The two of them further exaggerated the extent of Rinpoche's viciousness. Tell me, there's actually such a person nowadays? It was his younger brother who injured my younger brother, yet he still acted like this. I thought I had returned to the old society, Lu Qing said angrily. The two of them looked at each other and said, You guys wait here. You guys want to arrest him? Lu Qing asked with her eyes wide open. At the same time, she wondered if they would take away the 1.4 million yuan on the ground if that person was arrested. Don't do anything else. Wait for news. The two of them instructed, turned around, and left the ward to make a call to their superiors. When Qin Shi heard this news, he felt a headache coming on. That person dared to shoot at him. Was he easy to talk to? It wasn't easy to get that person to behave for a few months. Furthermore, both parties were in the honeymoon stage of their cooperation, and now this incident happened. Look for them and try to mediate. The first priority is not to disturb the social order. Chief, it's not easy. The two young men immediately revealed a troubled look. They had seen all kinds of information about those two people and were very clear about what kind of people they were. It would be weird if they were easy to talk to. Even if it's not easy, we still have to do it. This is a society governed by law. We can't let them do whatever they want, Qin Shi said in a deep voice. He then added, We can settle the matter with the school. As for the Lu family, if we can't get them to apologize, we are the ones who caused this incident. If they didn't have evil intentions, this incident wouldn't have happened. Their actions can also be considered extortion and blackmail. So troublesome. After the Empress got into the car, she felt that Rinpoche was too long-winded. He actually talked so much. We have to give the others time to react. Rinpoche laughed. In this aspect, the Empress was too simple and straightforward. And then? The Empress guessed who he was talking about. She felt that many things in this world were done in a roundabout way and weren't straightforward at all. If it was in that world, she might have thought more about it. But to her, this world was like a vacation place. She didn't want to think about it at all. Then, let's see if they are smart or not. Rinpoche laughed. What do you mean? The Empress turned to look at him and asked. Rinpoche turned to look at the Empress and moved his body closer. The Empress immediately placed her hand on his face to stop him from moving closer. However, it was very gentle. At least this time there was no blood. Rinpoche gently licked the Empress's palm. Immediately, the Empress felt as if she had been electrocuted. She quickly withdrew her hand and raised her other hand as if she was going to hit him. She waved her hand but didn't make a move. Like I said before, this is also a declaration. No one should provoke me. Otherwise, I will magnify any small matter infinitely and seek revenge for the smallest grievance. After all, I'm just one person and I can't handle so many people thinking about me. It's still okay now, but people are always insatiable. There will always be people thinking about more things. Then, they will test my bottom line bit by bit and squeeze more things out of me like squeezing toothpaste. I don't want to encounter such a situation in the future. Therefore, I want to repeatedly remind them what kind of person I am. A kind person will be bullied and a kind horse will be ridden. The saying makes sense. In this way, when they want to have crooked thoughts in the future, they will have to think twice before killing me. If they can't, they will endure it. I'm so long-winded because I want to give them time to react. What happens after that? After that, I will kill them in front of them. Rinpoche laughed heartily. This is what you call provocation, right? The Empress didn't feel that there was anything wrong with his attitude. If he were to be killed, so be it. If he were to be overcautious and hesitant, she wouldn't like it. However, Rinpoche's actions were obviously provocative. So let's see if they are smart or not. Rinpoche stretched out his index finger and lightly tapped on the Empress's lips. His next action was to tap on his own lips. This was a little fun between couples. Even though the Empress was always a little shy, this kind of action was still acceptable. Then, the Empress did something unexpected. She opened her pearly white teeth and suddenly bit down. Chapter 312. Rinpoche and the Empress left the hospital and went straight to Furong Street. This street was located in the center of Quanqing and was famous for its snacks. Both of them felt very excited when they arrived at this place. For the rest of the journey, both of them had a clear division of labor. Rinpoche was in charge of buying while the Empress was in charge of eating. Basically, as long as there were slightly more people in front of the store, both of them would go one round. Teppanyaki super large squid, transparent shrimp dumplings, octopus meatballs, transparent shrimp dumplings, grilled cheese, smoke ice cream, fried pork tripe, rujiamo, pineapple rice. The two of them didn't care about the surrounding scenery at all. All their thoughts were on eating. Rinpoche couldn't help but be envious of the Empress's appetite. The entire street was filled with food. Both of them had eaten more than 2,000 snacks that ranged from a few dollars to more than $10. Of these snacks, 99% were eliminated by the Empress. Humans were far from achieving this level of strength. It was unknown how many foodies wished to eat all over the street, but unfortunately no one could achieve it. After eating for more than 3 hours, even though some of the dishes didn't taste that good, they were fresh. Most of them were dishes that the Empress had never seen before. This made her feel that this trip wasn't as boring as before. Just taking a stroll around here was already worth it. Even though the Empress had a good appetite, there were still some things that she couldn't eat. For example, she threw the stinky tofu to Rinpoche. Since then, she consciously kept a 1-meter distance from him. She always felt that he had a stinky smell, which made Rinpoche feel aggrieved. Stinky tofu tastes delicious, okay? The two of them wandered around outside as if they had nothing to do, while the others could only watch from afar. After all, there was an incident where Rinpoche opened fire after being disturbed. Qinshi had a deep impression of it. If he had a choice, he wouldn't want to disturb the two of them while they were shopping. Qinshi had long sensed that these two people were just docile donkeys. As long as he did not provoke them, nothing would happen. He would just live like an ordinary person, shopping, watching television at home, going out to eat. For people like them to have superhuman strength and not stir up any trouble and keep such a low profile, it was really surprising. He had a good impression of the two of them. Sometimes, when I think about it, maybe this is how a cultivator should be. After all, the difference in their levels was too great, and their pursuits were different as well. Therefore, they did not care much about the money and status that everyone in the world pursued. However, if someone provoked them, then they would be in big trouble. The two of them would definitely not be lenient. Just like this incident, it seemed like a small matter to many people. As long as Rinpoche gave a call, someone would immediately handle it. But he didn't even say a word and just charged over. This was too much for them to handle. Qinshi also made up his mind to spend more effort on Papa Rin, Mama Rin, and Rin Wanyin. At the same time, he had another idea. He would recruit Rin Wanyin into a certain department, which would definitely be of great use in the future. It seemed like Rinpoche still cared about his family. Even though he didn't go home often, he made a lot of phone calls. He was no different from an ordinary person who drifted outside. Rinpoche and the Empress ate all over the street and finally returned to the hotel. The hotel had a suite with 2 bedrooms and a big living room. After the Empress came back, she didn't even change her clothes. In a flash, she landed on the sofa and naturally turned on the television. Rinpoche felt that the Empress's daily routine was to eat, watch television, eat, sleep, eat, watch television, an endless cycle. Every time he thought of this problem, he felt that he had committed a grave sin. Just as he threw off his shoes and sat on the sofa, he heard a knock on the door. Coming? Rinpoche thought to himself. He dragged his slippers over to open the door and saw a man standing outside. He was about 35 to 40 years old. His looks were ordinary but he looked very calm. "Hello, Mr. Rin. My name is Wang Zijuan. I have something to discuss with you. Can we talk inside?" Wang Zijuan nodded slightly and revealed a friendly smile. However, he didn't shake hands with him. "Come in." Rin Baqian opened the door. He threw off his slippers and sat cross-legged on the sofa. He pointed to the side and said, "Make yourself at home. Sorry to disturb you." Wang Zijuan smiled and sat on the single-seater sofa at the side. "The lives of the two of you are really enviable. Unlike us who are always busy," Wang Zijuan said with a smile. Rin Baqian nodded and didn't reply. He had no intention of making small talk anyway. The Empress hugged a pillow and used the remote control to search for her favorite program. "Mr. Rin, I'm from the Ministry of Security. I'll be straight to the point. It's like this. We have already understood what happened to your younger brother. There's definitely no problem with the school, so you don't have to worry. Although the people from the Liu family are a little annoying, they are just ordinary people. Compared to you, they are like heaven and earth. You don't have to worry about them. Why don't you let us handle them? They will learn a lesson from this incident." Rin Baqian heard this and knew that this was a typical case of turning a big problem into a small one and then turning a small one into nothing. This was the end of the matter. However, how could Rin Baqian let this matter end like this? He smiled faintly and said, "Although mosquitoes are small, they still have to be swatted to death." Wang Zijuan heard this and realized that it was just as he had expected. After hearing the whole story, he had already guessed that this would happen. "Why don't we let them apologize to you? After all, you said that you would abide by the law after coming back. There's no need to go against your words for these ordinary people. It's not worth it for a person like you to waste your energy on these people," Wang Zijuan immediately said. Rin Baqian shook his head and said, "At that time I said that if no one provoked me, I would definitely abide by the law. Moreover, I was already very restrained. Otherwise, I would have swatted them to death today. Isn't that simple and direct? Why do you have to say so much nonsense?" He changed the topic and said, "Actually, rather than trying to persuade me, why don't you persuade those people? It's just a tongue, what's there to be reluctant about? They won't die anyway. Keeping that thing around will be a disaster for some people. Who knows when they might die from it?" Wang Zijuan smiled bitterly and said, "You must be joking, Mr. Rin. We are currently cooperating with each other, and both of us are very satisfied with our cooperation. The higher-ups also hope that we can continue to cooperate in a friendly manner and don't want this matter to affect both of us. That's none of my business. You see, I don't lack money, nor do I lack anything else. The so-called cooperation is more like I've made a certain sacrifice for the progress of the people of the world. I've taken out something that belongs to me. Although it's in the name of cooperation, you guys have gained more than me. Oh, in that case, I'm really quite great." Rin Baqian thought about it and felt that he was indeed very great. "Look, I'm such a noble person, a pure person, a moral person, a person who has broken away from vulgar interests, and a person who is beneficial to the people." Rin Baqian was all smiles. He suddenly realized that he was actually so great and he felt a little excited. Wang Zijuan was speechless. He really didn't know how to respond to Rin Baqian's words. Sure enough, it was as difficult to deal with as described in the information. "Mr. Rin, let's talk about it. How do you think we can resolve this matter?" Wang Zijuan asked bluntly. "I want those 2 tongues. I'm a man of my word. If I say I want 2, I definitely don't want 3. If I say I want to kill their entire family, I won't leave a single one alive. Of course, this time, I'm just giving them a small punishment to tell them that they can't be too ruthless. The heavens are watching what we do. Of course, if you are willing to put them in cement cans and throw them into the river, that's fine with me. Whether it's from a legal or moral point of view, what Mr. Rin is doing is illegal and too ruthless. Our duty is to protect the people. It's impossible for us to watch Mr. Rin do such a thing." Wang Zijuan felt a headache coming on. Did I really go too far? Rin Baqian turned to look at the Empress with a puzzled look. If it were me, I would have smacked them to death. If anyone has any objections, I will smack them to death too. The Empress finally shifted her gaze away from the television with a look of disgust. "You see, I'm too soft-hearted." Rin Baqian turned his head and spread out his hands. "Mr. Rin?" Wang Zijuan was interrupted by Rin Baqian before he could finish his sentence. "I've already said what I wanted to say. There's no need to say anything else. You can try to stop us, but I suggest that you persuade them. Goodbye, remember to close the door." Rin Baqian waved his hand. Seeing that there was no way to negotiate, Wang Zijuan left the room with a gloomy face. After he left, Rin Baqian smiled. He was very satisfied with his previous attitude. His attitude was very amiable and had already expressed his goodwill. You said that it depends on whether they are smart or not. If they are smart, what should we do? The Empress was a little curious. Rinpoche had already spoken so harshly. She didn't know how Rinpoche was going to end this matter. Your Majesty, you have to give me some rewards before I can tell you. Rinpoche turned his head and spoke in a tone that sounded like he was asking for benefits. His face was full of anticipation. For example, he would tell her if she gave him a kiss or if he gave her a kiss. Then he was kicked off the sofa by the Empress. Qin Shi received the news. After smoking 2 cigarettes, he frowned and said, "Arrest those people from the Liu family for extortion." Initially he didn't have any good ideas. However, the Liu family had asked Mama Ren for 100,000 yuan in medical fees. This matter could be either big or small and he could use it now. This could also be considered as protecting the few of them. Otherwise, if Rinpoche and Qi Zixiao really wanted to do something, it would be very difficult to stop them. What should they do then? Fall out with them? Or should they pretend that nothing happened? No matter what they did, it wasn't appropriate. On the contrary, this was the most suitable way. According to the regulations, 100,000 yuan was considered a huge amount of extortion and extortion. They would be sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. Since this was an attempt, their sentence would be reduced and they would be released in 1 to 2 years. By then, Rinpoche would have long forgotten about it. This family wasn't any good people. This time, it could be considered as giving them a long memory. Lu Jing was still waiting in the hospital. At this moment, she had an unbridled look on her face. Those 4 bags of money were placed beside her. And when her husband just heard about this matter, he was a little speechless. That person is really courting death. Judging from his behavior, I don't know how many crimes he has committed. He should have been arrested a long time ago. It would be best if he was executed immediately, Lu Jing sneered. There was nothing more satisfying than someone threatening you right in front of you, only to be arrested and thrown into prison the next moment. Are they going to take the money away? Papa Lu asked. At this moment he was starting to have some ideas. Even if they could get tens of thousands of yuan in medical fees, it would still be good. It's okay. After such a big incident, I don't believe that the family won't fork out the money. When that happens, it won't just be a matter of 100,000 yuan. They also deserved it. Wouldn't it be over if they settled it earlier? They insisted that I go to the school. Now, the younger one is being punished by the school and the older one is also going to jail. Lu Jing felt that she had already won, and that the Ren family was going to be in big trouble. Be careful in the future. If you really offend someone you can't afford to offend, it will be troublesome, Lu Jing's husband said. What are you afraid of? Lu Jing said disdainfully. Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? When a few police officers came in, Lu Jing immediately went up to them and asked, "Has that person been arrested?" At this time, other than this matter, she couldn't think of any other reason for the police to come here. They were probably here to inform her. Are you Lu Jing? One of them asked. Yes, I am. Lu Jing said with a relaxed expression. You are suspected of extortion and blackmail. Come with us. This is a detention warrant. The police did not say anything else and directly handcuffed her. The sudden change of events stunned everyone in the room. How did it become Lu Jing's arrest? Is there a mistake? Lu Jing's eyes widened as she asked in a shrill voice. Lu Man, Lu Mingjing, take them away too. This time, everyone was dumbfounded. Even Lu Jing's husband, who had just arrived, was stunned. How did this happen so suddenly? That night, when Rinpoche received the news, he said to the Empress, "See, there are always smart people in this world. I can't possibly chase them to the detention center, can I? This way I can express my attitude and save myself the trouble." The Empress raised her head and snorted, ignoring him. Rinpoche listened to her voice and felt that it was a little cute. He called his parents and told them that the matter had been resolved. Then they chatted for a while. Then he lay on the sofa and watched the Empress's swaying figure walk into the room. He was in a daze for a while and then sighed. Now, his relationship with the Empress was pretty good. He was getting more and more familiar with the Empress's character. In some aspects, the Empress was also becoming more and more like a girl. However, the difference in strength was too big. Even if they were married now, Rinpoche felt that he would be unlucky on the day of their wedding night. He still had to work hard. After the Empress closed the door, Rinpoche thought for a while and lay back on the bed to practice the visualization of wood. Once again he appeared in the world where there was only a towering tree. The Empress heard the noise outside. She sat on the bed with a slight smile on her face. She rolled a few times on the bed, hugged a pillow and pondered for a while before falling asleep. The night passed. Early the next morning, the two of them set off for Shurching and conveniently displayed a wave of public display of affection on the plane. Qin Shi heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this news. Sure enough, it was as he had expected. The matter was resolved just like that. Chapter 313. In this world, nothing is eternal. Water can turn into steam, it can also freeze. Stones can be weathered into sand and dust. Metals can also be turned into liquid under high temperatures. Under changing conditions, nothing is eternal, Rinpoche said to everyone on the stage. Everyone listened to him obediently. Although they looked a little older and stronger, they were different from ordinary primary schools in remote mountainous areas. However, they were essentially the same. Rinpoche had learned to ignore the surface and look at the essence. At least on this matter. Rinpoche had already started to consider whether to customize their uniforms. There were also red scarves and 1, 2, 3 stripes. However, Rinpoche felt that they could be changed to 1 knife, 2 knives, all the way to 9 knives. After a period of time, everyone had become familiar with this new life and their new identities. Their interest was also aroused. After all, many of the things that Rinpoche talked about were unheard of and even unthinkable. Some of the content was acceptable, while others were difficult to accept. For example, Rinpoche's words just now. Rinpoche was very satisfied. Although it hadn't been long, this group of naughty kids had finally learned to raise their hands and ask questions under the care of his gun. The bandages on several students were the price of love. He couldn't rule out the possibility that 2 of them were accidentally injured, but he didn't care too much about these details. Speak. Rinpoche used a pointer made of pure iron and as thick as a finger to point at a young man below. The heroic spirits of our ancestors are eternal. They have always been protecting us, the young man suddenly said loudly. Rinpoche tilted his head and looked at him. His gaze made the young man feel a little uneasy and vigilant. That's right. There are still some things in this world that people can't detect, including the heroic spirits of our ancestors. Therefore, what I'm teaching now is the basic structure of the world, the things that have been discovered, and the things that are currently unknown will be handed over to you. Science is about standing on the shoulders of the predecessors and constantly discovering the unknown, not denying the unknown. I hope you all remember this. Rinpoche smiled very calmly. He didn't deny the existence of those heroic spirits, just like how Earth couldn't deny the existence of ghosts. These were all unknown things that hadn't been discovered yet, but it didn't mean that they didn't exist. Just like how he had not found the reason for his transmigration, it did not mean that it did not exist. It only meant that he had not discovered it yet. Rinpoche's calm smile made many of the students heave a sigh of relief. They were also somewhat elated. This was a rare affirmation from Rinpoche. Tong Lan supported her chin with one hand and grinned. In her heart, she was laughing at the bunch of idiots around her. The world is made up of molecules, atoms and ions. This is the foundation of the world. These invisible molecules, compounds, and ions make up all the matter in this world. Teacher, since we can't see it, how do we know if what you said is true? Someone immediately raised his hand and asked. You can't see the molecules with an optical microscope. You need an electron microscope. If the conditions are right in the future, I will make a set for you. In addition, there are many other ways to verify it. I will explain them to you in the future, Rinpoche said faintly. Immediately, someone asked what an optical microscope and an electron microscope were. Rinpoche gave simple answers to these questions. Usually, the physics class went well and Rinpoche was in a good mood. Therefore, the physics class was held in the first period. Today we will do an experiment on the transformation of the structure of water. First, under normal atmospheric pressure, water will reach its boiling point at 100 degrees Celsius and turn from water into water vapor. Rinpoche spoke with fervor and assurance as he placed a small pot, an alcohol stove and a thermometer on the desk. Come, let's take a look. The thermometer has reached 80 degrees Celsius, and 100 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of water. As Rinpoche spoke, everyone craned their necks to take a look. Although everyone knew that water would turn into water vapor after boiling, this was the first time such a formal experiment was conducted. Many people were very interested. Then, everyone watched as the temperature of the water exceeded 100,101,102,103. 110 degrees. Alright, it has now been proven that under normal atmospheric pressure, water will boil at 110 degrees Celsius and turn into gas. At this pressure, the temperature of the water will also be maintained at 110 degrees Celsius. Rinpoche extinguished the alcohol stove and threw it out of the window along with the pot. Teacher, you said 100 degrees Celsius just now. Tong Lan's eyes were bright and full of expression. The atmospheric pressure isn't constant. It varies from region to region. Usually, the higher the altitude, the lower the atmospheric pressure. Here it's 110 degrees Celsius. You just have to remember that the higher the atmospheric pressure, the higher the boiling point, and the lower the atmospheric pressure, the lower the boiling point. This was the first time Rinpoche realized that the atmospheric pressure in this world was actually different from that on Earth. This also reminded him once again that although he didn't feel much difference, this world was, after all, a different world. There were still many things that were different from that on Earth. In order to develop technology in this world, everything had to be verified little by little. Otherwise he might get slapped in the face again. Next, he used saltpeter to turn water into ice in front of everyone. This surprised everyone and immediately reminded them of the shaved ice that was sold outside. This lesson talked about the two forms of water transformation. When the lesson was about to end, Rinpoche asked someone to move the teaching materials that he had brought back from the next room and distributed them to everyone. Teacher, what are these? Your future learning materials are from my country. Everyone knew that Rinpoche wasn't from Dayo. However, not many people knew which country Rinpoche was from. I come from a very distant country. It's so far away that you will never be able to reach it in your lifetime. Our country is very different from this world. In our country, people prefer to study the nature of the world. In our opinion, the degree of understanding of the world will become one's strength and allow one to achieve things that were previously impossible. For example, a machine that can run faster than a galloping horse, a machine that can fly in the air, a machine that can lift objects that weigh 100,000 kilograms or even 500,000 kilograms. This was also the first time that Rinpoche frankly talked about some things about Earth to someone other than the Empress. Previously, he was afraid that people would know that he had a lot of good things in his hands and set their eyes on him. As a result, he didn't dare to say much. However, with the change in his status, he no longer needed to worry about this and naturally didn't need to hide it. Furthermore, he had already exposed a lot of things. Instead of letting them guess, he might as well take this opportunity to briefly explain. There was nothing shameful about it. It was better than letting them guess whether he was from Great Xiao or the Yun Nation. Teacher, what's this? Someone pointed to a picture that had just been flipped open in a physics book. Is this the machine that you mentioned? It's a high-speed rail that can travel more than 1,200 kilometers in 2 hours without any rest. A place that would normally take a few days to reach on a galloping horse can be reached in just 2 to 4 hours. If Dayo had this, it would only take 4 hours to reach Ping City from here. If anything happens, our army can reach Ping City in 4 hours. Rinpoche's words caused everyone to look surprised. One had to know that it would take half a month to travel from Lan City to Ping City by carriage and 3 to 4 days on a galloping horse. If there was a war, they would be able to provide support at any time with this thing. Furthermore, battle reports could be sent back at any time. This was too valuable. Most of the people present were the children of officials. Even if they weren't very talented or reckless, they could still think of this thing. If you want to build a high-speed rail, you need a lot of things. I can teach you, but it's up to you when it can be built. Rinpoche smiled. He liked to see the excitement and anticipation on the faces of these students as it gave him a sense of accomplishment. Following which, he told the students some other things. The students felt as if they were listening to a book from heaven, and all of them widened their eyes. Tong Lan and Shurgan didn't get distracted and listened attentively. However, this joyous atmosphere didn't last for long. During the second lesson, Rinpoche's roar was heard again. During the mathematics class, gunshots were heard. Chapter 3:14. Is that what Principal Rin said? Tong Jingye was shocked to hear Tong Lan's words. That high-speed rail thing was actually so fast? It was simply terrifying. With this thing, Dayo could send reinforcements in all directions at any time. For example, they could mobilize the troops from the Protectorate of the South and the Protectorate of the Southeast to the north and send them out directly. If what Principal Rin said was true, it would be close to the means of the gods. This is the thing. Tong Lan took out a book, flipped open the cover, and pointed at something for Tong Jingye to see. I don't know if he's bragging. Tong Jingye stroked his beard and looked at it carefully for a long time, firmly remembering the image. Don't talk nonsense. Principal Rin is truly capable, Tong Jingye said in a deep voice. He was aware of the few things that Rinpoche had done. Rinpoche had the most dealings with the Ministry of Works, so he recognized him the most. Rinpoche's official position had also changed. He was now the principal of Black Bamboo Academy, the highest and only academy in Dayo, and his official rank was secondary class, rank 4. Speaking of which, Rinpoche's promotion speed was extremely fast. He couldn't even beat me and sent me flying with a flick of my finger. Tong Lan curled her lips. You can't say that. Even though some people don't have extraordinary martial arts skills, they are better than many others in other aspects. There are many such people in Great Xia, and Principal Ren is also one of them. At least, the things that he said shocked even me. Tong Jingye shook his head. It seems that sending you to the academy was the right decision. Tong Jingye was quite proud of his gaze when he mentioned this matter. When he took the initiative to send Tong Lan to the academy, her father didn't approve of it. Now it seemed that it was the right decision. I feel that I've become stupid after being with a bunch of fools every day. According to him, being stupid is contagious and my IQ has been dragged down. Tong Lan pouted unhappily. Besides Tong Jingye, who often asked Tong Lan what she had learned, the families of the other students would also ask about it from time to time. The main reason was that Rinpoche's initial explanation of everything in the world had shocked them. However, these days, these juniors who were sent to Black Bamboo Academy had learned a lot of strange knowledge, and no one knew if it was good or bad. Lao Lu, let's go out for a drink. In a remote courtyard of a residence, a door was suddenly pushed open, and a tall and burly young man in a robe strode in. A young man sitting at the table was tempted. He hadn't gone out for a drink for a few days. In the past, it was unimaginable. In the past, a group of brothers would go out drinking and having fun almost every night. Now they would sit in the house and do homework every night. Lan, let's go. That girl said she hadn't seen you for a few days. I said she missed you. The big man patted his shoulder and said. At the mention of that girl, the young man who was addressed as Old Six was even more tempted, and he almost agreed. However, he recalled what Rinpoche had said before. Rinpoche's right. Dong Tong said, Bachen Jingye the Yi, that he said. Lan. Rin, Lan I said. I have Rin has yang people's Tian is as yang as E is yang is has yang teacher is yang is. There are 2 more days until my rest day. I'll go out for a drink then. Yagüe was the nickname they gave Rinpoche. Yagüe was a monkey-like animal in the 60,000 mountains, but it was ferocious, fast, and strong. In their eyes, Rinpoche was similar to Yagüe. He looked thin and weak, but he was ferocious. Lao Lu, when did you become so timid? You are like a sissy from Great Xia. The burly man was surprised. Lao Lu used to be very bold, but he didn't expect him to become so timid after being sent to Black Bamboo Academy for half a month. He didn't even dare to drink, let alone do his homework. Get lost, don't disturb my homework. Lao Lu scolded and ignored him. He continued to work on his math problems with a bitter look on his face. 3 times 9 is 18, 7 times 7 is 56. The next day. Bang. A gunshot was heard from the Black Bamboo Academy. School doctor. Su Wei shouted loudly. Coming. A bald burly man who was thinner and weaker than the aboriginals, came out of the room with a package. Bang. Before he could enter the classroom, another gunshot was heard. Rinpoche cursed, I'm going to kill all of you idiots. Treat his wound first. Use the black mud cream to treat it. I will shoot him for 5 minutes today. 2 days later, the young man called Lao Lu and Du Lao Lu were sitting in a restaurant with a few friends. It had been 5 days and he finally saw some wine. Without hesitation, he drank a jar. After drinking a jar of wine, Du Lao Lu heaved a long sigh of relief. Why don't you come out recently? I heard that you do something until midnight every night? A pretty young girl with a voluptuous figure said. She scolded him fiercely at first, but her words turned into curiosity at the end. Sigh. Du Lao's heart ached at the mention of this. Du Lao Lu pulled down his shirt and pointed at his shoulders and arms, which were covered with pale circles that were whiter than the rest of his body. They were all done by Yagüe. Not only here but also on my legs. Yagüe? The people around him were curious. It's the principal of the academy. Du Changkong complained gloomily about Rinpoche's atrocities. The people around him burst into laughter. Why don't you come back like Tai Zhe? Du Lao Lu was silent for a while before replying, Brothers, I'm not like you. Even if my talent isn't amazing, it's still passable. In my case, I will most likely end up like what the principal said. I will be raised at home and become a good-for-nothing. At least now is an opportunity. Everyone was silent after hearing this. In fact, many people had people like Du Laolu in their families. Although there weren't many of them, everyone knew that they could often see them. It wouldn't matter if they were commoners. However, in their families, having such talent was a sin in itself. Du Laolu wasn't talented, but he was loyal and smart. Therefore he got along well with everyone and everyone was willing to invite him out to play. However, they also knew that if nothing changed, Du Laolu would probably remain the same in the future. Therefore no one could refute Du Laolu's words. Can we really learn something there? The pretty girl asked. Du Laolu nodded. Although he didn't know what use the things he learned now, other than mathematics, would be in the future, he believed that he would be able to learn something. In that case, I will look for you to play on your days off. The girl smiled and her eyes lit up. Du Laolu nodded and was very grateful for what she said. He swore to himself that he would definitely learn something so that he wouldn't become a good-for-nothing in the future and then marry her. Chapter 3:15. There was a ripple in the air. Ren Baqin appeared in Pingle Park, sitting on a mechanical monster that was made up of various metal parts and had a wheel on each side. That's right, Ren Baqin brought one back from Earth to show the students what a technological product was. Even though that bunch of idiots often made him furious, he was still very attentive. This was because he saw something in those students that he didn't have in the past. The desire to learn. The thirst for knowledge. Even though they were a little stupid and their minds were filled with muscles and sakama, at least they would do their homework every day. Ren Baqin was very satisfied with this point. The motorcycle was a cruising prince. It was a Benda origin beast that was launched in China last year and weighed more than 170 kilograms. The body of the motorcycle was compact and full of muscles. For the people in this world, it should be full of sci-fi. He took off 2 big bags and a box from the back of the motorcycle, checked them and hung another bag. Besides the Empress's snacks, a thumb drive filled with television dramas, solar street lights, batteries and solar panels. After putting everything down, Ren Baqin exerted force with both hands, shouted softly, and picked up the motorcycle to put it down in the courtyard. Then he put on his sunglasses and stepped on the starting lever. When the motorcycle roared, he had no choice but to stop. A chubby fellow was hugging the motorcycle's tire and rubbing against it. "Get lost!" Ren Baqin shouted. Then another panda eagerly came over and hugged his leg. "Sir, what kind of monster is this?" The guard outside heard the noise and wanted to come in to ask what was going on. Then he saw the monster that Ren Baqin was sitting on. "Take these 2 fellows away." Ren Baqin waved his hand. After that guard carried the 2 pandas by their necks to the side, Ren Baqin stepped on the starting lever, turned the accelerator, and directly drove out of Pingle Park. What kind of monster is this? Just as he left the courtyard, he met a group of guards. The person in front almost pulled out his saber and slashed at him. He was a classic example of a person whose hands reacted faster than his brain. "Spare him, spare the motorcycle," Ren Baqin quickly shouted. He was almost scared to death by that reckless fellow. That person quickly withdrew his saber. "Can't you see that I'm up there?" Ren Baqin clenched his teeth. "Sir Ren." The 5 guards quickly cupped their hands. "When I heard the roar and saw this thing, I thought it was a monster. Sir Ren, please don't blame me." Ren Baqin gritted his teeth. This bunch of muscleheads. The few of them looked at Ren Baqin, who had ground 2 black gemstones into thin slices and hung them in front of his eyes. Recently, many adults seemed to like these things very much. Every day they would look up at the sky with these things on their heads. Then he shifted his gaze to the motorcycle that Ren Baqin was sitting on. "Sir Ren, what is this?" "This is my new ride. Make way, make way. Let me show you." Ren Baqin and the rest made way for them. Then he stepped on the accelerator and sped off with a roar. "What monster?" "Spare the chariot," the same voice came from afar. The guards were still in a daze. What exactly was Sir Ren's new mount? They didn't have legs. Instead, they were 2 things that looked like carriage tires. "This item is extraordinary," someone said enviously. The others nodded in agreement. This mount was much more powerful than riding a horned cow. Along the way, Ren Baqin was almost killed a few times. He was so angry that he cursed out loud. Fortunately, when he arrived at Yangxing Palace Hall, he carried the Empress's snacks in. The Empress was still watching television. Recently, she had been obsessed with it. In the past, when she had nothing to do, she would call for 2 musicians. Ever since she had a laptop, the few musicians in the palace were almost out of work. "What was that sound just now?" The Empress turned her head and asked. That sound was inexplicably familiar. A motorcycle. Ren Baqin smiled and opened his bag. He took out 2 bottles of wine and placed them at the side. Then he took out the Empress's favorite ice cream and said, "It's still cold and hasn't melted." The Empress took the ice cream, wrinkled her nose slightly and looked very satisfied. "Dang dang dang dang, and your favorite popcorn." Rinpoche took out 2 buckets of popcorn from his bag and instantly appeared in the Empress's hands. Following which, the Empress stuffed all kinds of chocolates and candies into the cracks of the sofa. In the past he didn't pay much attention to these things. Now Rinpoche finally knew where the Empress usually hid her snacks. He took out a few packets of potato chips, placed the empty bag at the side and sat on the sofa. His fingers intertwined as if they were dancing on the sofa. The moment he touched the Empress's palm, he heard a slap. Rinpoche nonchalantly touched the back of his hand. He couldn't remember who once said, "Get used to being beaten and beaten." This sentence was very reasonable. You said that there might be salt in the mountains. The Empress suddenly thought of this problem after watching a television series for a while and seeing the dishes on the television series. Salt was still very important to Dayo. The price of salt in Dayo had always been limited by people. Let's wait for another month. First, teach them some basic knowledge, then bring them for an outing in the mountains. Rinpoche thought for a while and said, now that he had just gotten on the right track, he really didn't want to abandon this group of students and run into the mountains. It would be better to wait for another month until the beginning of March. At that time he would be able to demonstrate a chemistry experiment to them. Of course, the prerequisite was that the lake was as he imagined it to be. Those people in the south are being dishonest again. A few days ago we found a lot of crossbows made in the Yun nation and chopped off the heads of more than 300 people. However, this matter isn't over yet, the Empress said faintly with a trace of killing intent in her voice. Rinpoche rubbed his head. He had long heard about the situation in the south from the Empress. He also had some ideas, but it required time. He still had to go and see for himself. Let's put this matter aside for now. If there are any disobedient people, we can just chop them off. In any case, we have to chop them off sooner or later. It's not a pity to chop off those fools who expose themselves so easily. The rest are those who are honest or well hidden. I will see how to deal with them when the time comes. Rinpoche was a little hesitant. Should he kidnap an elite MLM from Earth? Those guys were definitely much stronger than him in this aspect. However, that kind of person was a double-edged sword. If used well, the problem in the south would be easily solved. If not, it might cause even more trouble. Rinpoche also felt that kidnapping a monk could have the same effect. However, it was also a double-edged sword. He wondered what would happen if he set up a religion in the south. It seemed that the effect would be better and it would be easier to control. If he combined the MLM model with religion, the effect would be fast and it would be easy to control. Furthermore, if he thought about it in the long run, this kind of religion could also dissolve the antagonism between the Aboriginals and the How Nation's immigrants. As for what this religion would become after his death, according to Rinpoche's opinion, the future generations would have their own blessings. Chapter 316. The next day Rinpoche rode the motorcycle under the escort of the ox riders. He was exceptionally eye-catching. Ever since he left the palace he had attracted a lot of eyeballs. This was the first time they had seen such a thing in Dayo, especially when it made such a strange roar. Even Su Wei and the rest would occasionally glance at Rinpoche and the monster he was riding. On this day when the students entered the academy, they saw the strange thing standing at the side. A group of people surrounded the motorcycle and curiously touched it. It was very hard and seemed to be made of metal. However, the black color on the outside didn't seem to be a common dye, so they couldn't figure out what exactly it was. Many people would eat 2 rolls on the road and touch the motorcycle, leaving a pile of greasy claw marks. What's this? I don't know. Is it made by the teacher? This is the machine that the teacher mentioned. Look at this, it's all made of iron. It looks weird, but it's a little light. I don't know what it's used for. A student lifted the motorcycle above his head and spun it a few times before putting it back in its original position. Tonglan, what are you doing? A short person suddenly squeezed in from the crowd. After touching the motorcycle a few times, she used her fingers to scratch it. Aya, you left a mark, someone immediately shouted. A bunch of fools. This is the color of the outside, Tonglan said in disdain. She used her fingers to scratch a long mark on the motorcycle. Rinpoche looked at the group of students surrounding the motorcycle from afar and didn't mind at all. This thing was originally meant for them to broaden their horizons. During class a student asked about it. Rinpoche casually said, "You will know later. Previously we talked about the change of state of matter. Today let's talk about the phenomenon of light. Turn to page XX in the physics textbook. Rinpoche would now read from the textbook during class every day. While learning physics, he also learned how to write. After the class ended for the day, Rinpoche walked to the side of the motorcycle and saw the scratches on it. He grinned and didn't blame them. Then he sat on the motorcycle, stepped on the start lever and twisted the accelerator. The motorcycle immediately emitted a loud roar, and the two pipes at the back started to emit smoke. This gave the students a shock. How could this thing fart so loudly? Rinpoche then galloped away like a wild dog that had escaped its leash. The group of guards hurriedly shouted and followed him. This thing can actually be ridden and it can even run, some students said in surprise. It seems very fun. Tong Lan's eyes sparkled. She was not the only one with stars in her eyes. Many of the people around her did the same. After all, this thing was too novel. It did not have long legs, but it could still run. Riding this thing on the streets wasn't just flashy, it was simply coquettish. Rinpoche rode back to the palace in an extremely coquettish manner. A few big shots who had just come out of the palace were shocked when they saw the thing that Rinpoche was riding. Principal Rin, what kind of mount is this? Tong Xinye came over and touched it curiously like a country bumpkin. Where's the mouth? How do I feed it? Without waiting for Rinpoche's reply, she grabbed him by the collar and pulled him down. Then she rode on him and knocked one of her legs on the side of the car. Why aren't you leaving? Tong Xinye became curious again. Looking at Tong Xinye's bumpkin appearance, Rinpoche ridiculed him with his nose in the air. After sending Tong Xinye and the rest away with great difficulty, Rinpoche returned to the palace. The next morning, the students were still circling around the motorcycle like yesterday. Did Yagüe ride it like this yesterday? One of them looked outside and did not see Rinpoche. Hence he copied Rinpoche and sat on it. What happened next? How can it move? The group of students looked at each other. They were too busy looking at this thing yesterday and did not see how Yagüe made it move. On this day after school, all the students looked at Rinpoche with bright and piercing eyes as he rode off on his motorcycle. Did you see that? How did it move? I saw its legs move twice. It looked like it was stepping on the ground. Its wrist also twisted. First the left hand, then the right hand. It should be like this. After school on the third day, the group of students continued to watch Rinpoche's movements. It was basically the same as yesterday, and they had actually memorized all of Rinpoche's movements. Early in the morning on the fourth day, Tong Lan carried her bowl and stood on the fork-horned cow. She walked while eating so that she could go to school earlier to play with that thing. When she arrived at the door, she stuck her head out and looked inside. She did not see Rinpoche, but she saw that thing in the corner. There were two bastards who were even faster than her. One of them was sitting on the motorcycle and imitating Rinpoche's movements by stepping on a small pole at the side. In a flash, Tong Lan appeared behind the two of them and shot the person on the motorcycle into the wall. She then sat on the motorcycle and said, I will play with it first. I will return it to you after I am done. The person who was shot into the wall was called Su Peng. He got up from the ground with a resentful look on his face. In order to play with this thing, he specially came over early in the morning. In the end, it was snatched away by this girl who was only half his height. However, he could not defeat this girl. Tong Lan sat on the motorcycle and snorted. Then a smile blossomed on her face. She held onto the handlebars with both hands and kicked the starting lever with one leg. She did not kick it. Tong Lan's face immediately turned green. Her legs were actually not long enough. Ha! Su Peng and Du Laolu, who were dissatisfied that Tong Lan had snatched the right to play this thing from them, immediately burst into laughter. It was really funny to see Tong Lan's short legs kicking and kicking, but she just could not reach it. Rinpoche, who was standing in front of the window and watching this scene from afar, burst into laughter. He quickly picked up his phone and wanted to take a picture of this scene. It would definitely be a dark history in the future. However, by the time he picked up his phone, Tong Lan had already flown into a rage out of humiliation. She flipped over on the motorcycle and kicked Du Laoyu's head from above, causing him to fall to the ground. She then flashed and appeared in front of Su Peng. She used one hand to deflect his fist and hit his chest with her head. Boom! A hole immediately appeared on the wall. Su Peng was nowhere to be seen. Sir, it won't be damaged, right? Su Wei, who was standing behind Tong Lan, was a little worried. This thing must be very valuable, and it would be a pity if it was damaged by this group of kids. It's okay. Rinpoche waved his hand. This could also stimulate the students' interest in learning. This thing was nothing to him. It was just a little troublesome to bring it over from Earth. Tong Lan was still unconvinced. After she beat the two of them to the ground, she tilted her body and started the motorcycle. She didn't even bother with the bracket, twisted the accelerator and sped away. The motorcycle flipped over in less than 3 seconds. At the moment when it flipped, Tong Lan jumped and landed on the ground, causing the motorcycle to flip over. Not fun. Tong Lan placed her hands behind her back, raised her small face and swayed back to the classroom with a proud look on her face. She saw Rinpoche's smiling face full of wrinkles as he looked at her from the window. She even made a funny face. After Tong Lan left, Su Peng flipped over the wall and entered the classroom. His whole body was covered in dust from the cement bricks, and he looked like a demolition worker. While he was still looking around for Tong Lan, another person lifted the motorcycle and sat on it. Su Peng was furious when he saw this. When he looked at that person again, he was immediately filled with anger, but he couldn't let it out. He couldn't beat this person either. Shurgan. The two youngest students in the entire academy were the best at fighting, which made the others very depressed. Shurgan wasn't very old, but he was about 1.7 meters tall and had a strong physique. He rode on the motorcycle with a pleased look on his face. He first tried it out, then tightened the accelerator, stepped on the start lever, and the motorcycle immediately sped away. Rinpoche watched as the motorcycle sped like the wind and crashed into the wall. The back of the motorcycle was lifted up, and Shurgan's head was directly hit against the wall. Boom! When the dust settled, the motorcycle was seen lying in front of the courtyard wall. It was already out of shape. There was a big hole in the wall. Shurgan was nowhere to be seen. This bunch of idiots. Rinpoche, who was standing behind the window, almost burst out laughing. He had already recorded everything that happened just now, especially Shurgan's happy expression as he sat on the motorcycle and stepped on the start lever. Coupled with what happened 2 seconds later, it was really too funny. If the video was played in slow motion, one could even see the frozen expression on his face the moment he crashed into the wall. Rinpoche was prepared to go back and get a video camera so that he could record all of this in the future. After a few years, when they had become the mainstay of the imperial court, he would then show the series of movies, The Growth Log of a Bear Student, to the whole of Dayo. Chapter 317. Tong Lan, Shurgan, do the two of you have anything to say about the motorcycle? Rinpoche stood on the stage and asked after the day's lessons. He broke it. Tong Lan immediately extended her small hand and pointed at Shurgan. It has nothing to do with me. Shurgan was still covered in dirt. After all, he had smashed his head against the brick wall and fell. After hearing Rinpoche's words, he put on an innocent expression. If he didn't know that this guy wasn't a good person, he might have been deceived by his expression. Rinpoche grinned and looked very sinister. Before him you had already fallen once. At that time you were already injured and there are witnesses and material evidence. Rinpoche spread his hands. Anyway, even if I didn't fall, I would still be broken by him, Tong Lan immediately retorted. I was walking alone with 150 taels of silver in my pocket. First, you robbed me of 50 taels and then Shurgan robbed me of 100 taels. It can't be that if you didn't snatch it, the 150 taels of silver would have been snatched away by Shurgan. That doesn't make sense. Dayo's laws are there, Rinpoche said as he knocked on the table with his pointer. You have to pay for damaging other people's property. It's as natural as repaying a debt. This principle has to be followed everywhere. After hearing Rinpoche's words, Tong Lan was so angry that she gritted her teeth. However, this matter was there and couldn't be avoided. Shurgan continued to put on an innocent expression. Teacher, I don't have money, Shurgan said. It was obvious that he didn't have money, but he had his life. I don't have money either. Tong Lan's eyes lit up. It doesn't matter. As your teacher, it's too tacky to talk about money. You see, I have never asked you for tuition fees since you entered the school. This time I'm not going to ask you to pay. Now you have 2 options. Rinpoche stretched out 2 fingers. First, fix the motorcycle within 7 days. Second, clean the toilet every day for a month. As soon as Rinpoche said this, Tong Lan exploded in anger. Impossible. How could such a cute young lady like her clean the toilet? How was that possible? If that was the case, she would probably be called a toilet girl for the rest of her life. How would she get married in the future? Tong Lan clenched her fists. The innocent expression on Shurgan's face disappeared and was replaced by widened eyes. If looks could kill, he would have hacked Rinpoche into pieces. His father was Shurqing, yet he actually wanted him to clean the toilet? Imparting knowledge and educating people is not only about teaching, but also about educating people. Not only do I have to teach you knowledge, but I also have to teach you how to be a person. Although my heart aches, I have no choice but to do this. Rinpoche's face was full of regret. The faces of the 49 people below were bright and full of expression. Who are you trying to fool? Your eyes are twitching from laughing so hard. Do you think we can't see that? If you don't want to clean the toilet, go fix the motorcycle. I'll give you 7 days. If it's not fixed by then, you can only clean the toilet. Don't think of anything else. It's useless even if you bring your 2 fathers here. Rinpoche placed the pointer on the lectern, clasped his hands behind his back, hummed a tune and walked out of the room. The others continued to stare at him with bright eyes. Didn't you have a pained expression on your face just now? What do you mean by your body becoming lighter? As soon as Rinpoche left the classroom, there was an uproar. Tong Lan smashed the table with her small fist. Following which, she stomped on the table and said, damn Jiague, I will definitely not let you off. Rinpoche suddenly poked his head in again and said, remember to fix the table tomorrow morning. You know the consequences. He even winked at Tong Lan, which almost infuriated her to death. After he disappeared, the classroom, which had been quiet for a few seconds, became chaotic again. There were more than 10 other female students in the classroom who supported Tong Lan. After all, Tong Lan was very pretty, and there were still many female students who felt sorry for her. There were also a few people who laughed heartily. They were Su Peng Du Laolu, and 2 other teenagers who had escaped a calamity in the morning. They laughed happily but were then shot into the wall by Tong Lan. Shurgan stood up from his seat, walked to Rinpoche's previous position, cleared his throat and attracted everyone's attention. Following which, he cupped his hands and said, brothers and sisters, this matter is very important. Please help us. After this, regardless of whether we succeed or not, I will host a banquet at House Shanhui to thank all of you. I won't go home until I'm drunk. Ever since Shurgan entered the school, he rarely interacted with others. In addition, he always looked like he was daydreaming, so many people didn't really like him. However, now that he said this and addressed them as brothers and sisters, it wasn't good for them to stay out of this matter. One after another, they laughed and said, then we will wait for you to treat us to a drink. Rinpoche, who was next door, learned about what happened in the classroom and had a whole new level of respect for Shurgan. Dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and the son of a mouse knew how to dig holes. This saying indeed made sense. In fact, there were 2 people in the school who didn't fit in with the crowd. One was Tong Lan, and the other was Shurgan. Both of them were young but they weren't weak. Their talents were considered outstanding among their peers, and they were very different from the others. Naturally, they were somewhat arrogant. However, their behavior was different. Tong Lan was very obvious. Even though she would shoot people into the wall at the slightest provocation, she was beautiful and cute. This was the most important point. No matter which world one was in, one could rely on one's looks to make a living. Tong Lan was small and short, so many people treated her as a little sister. This was especially so for the female students. Tong Lan had never laid her hands on the female students in the school. As a result, there were actually quite a number of people who liked Tong Lan. However, Shurgan was different. Other than daydreaming, he was daydreaming every day. Even though he didn't behave like Tong Lan, everyone could sense the arrogance in his bones. When Tong Lan encountered trouble, there were people who would help her, but no one cared about Shurgan. Today, after Shurgan realized that it would be very difficult for the 2 of them to fix that seemingly complicated thing in 7 days, he immediately said these words, which brought back a lot of people. After all, they were all aboriginals in their teens and didn't have too many complicated thoughts. Rinpoche just didn't know if he already had the idea to improve their relationship, or if he only had this idea after encountering this matter today. If it was the former, it would be fine if he already had the idea to get closer to others. However, if it was the latter, Rinpoche wasn't very happy about it. However, no matter what, it showed that Shurgan was more mature and smarter than his peers. Thinking about how his father was great elder Shurchin, it made people feel at ease. No matter what race it was, there would always be some eccentrics. The entire race was made up of crazy cats, and there were even cats whose personalities were similar to dogs. For the next few days, a group of people would surround and study the motorcycle every morning and afternoon. From time to time they would hear, this part should be straight. Bend it straight. You broke it. This thing is too brittle. It will break in one move. Quickly find a blacksmith to make a new one. Are you here to help or to cause trouble? Why did you pull this off? How do we put this thing back? There was an endless stream of similar voices. During this period, Tong Lan would snort coldly. Whenever she did something wrong, she would raise her head to the sky and snort proudly. There was also Shurgan's encouraging voice, "Brothers and sisters, you are the best. Every small step we take forward is a great victory for us." Every time Rinpoche heard something like this, he would be puzzled. Where did Shurgan learn all these from? He hadn't heard anything like this from great elder Shurchin. It would be a waste of talent if he didn't become a young pioneer. Over the next few days, Rinpoche observed their daily repair progress. He was positive about their demolition ability, but also pessimistic about their repair ability. Shurgan and Tong Lan couldn't run away from the task of cleaning the toilet. This wasn't out of his expectations. If they could repair it, they wouldn't be students from Black Bamboo Academy. They would definitely be from Lanxiang. In a courtyard in Lan City, a few men gathered together and whispered to each other. Lin Zhongli and the other 5 were all killed yesterday, the man in the middle said in a deep voice. Everyone's faces darkened when they heard this. More than 40 people split into 7 teams and sneaked in. Now only a few of us are left and we didn't even get close to that person. The man at the side was indignant. More than 40 Earth Wheel experts were handpicked from the army, but they didn't even get a chance to get close to that person. The city has been so strict for the past 2 months. We didn't even get a chance to make a move, and we already lost more than half of our men. I'm afraid that we won't be able to complete the mission even if all of us are sacrificed, another man said dispiritedly. After all, this isn't our territory. As long as we are slightly suspected, they won't even interrogate us before killing us. There are at least 100 people who have been killed recently. In my opinion, we might as well take a risk. Even if we fail, we will have tried our best and be worthy of the Emperor's grace. A man who looked somewhat effeminate gritted his teeth and said, "That person has 30 Earthwheel experts by his side every day. We won't even have a chance to take a risk. It's better than the current situation. Who knows, we might not even have a chance to take a risk tomorrow or the day after tomorrow," the effeminate man said. "There's no need for tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. All of you can go and die now." A rough voice suddenly sounded from outside the courtyard, following which a loud sound came from the courtyard wall. The entire wall turned into countless stones that smashed toward them. 2 of them barely managed to dodge a few stones before they were smashed into a bloody mess by the remaining stones. They couldn't even make out their human forms. The rest of them soared into the sky and fled in 3 different directions without saying a word. Several rays of sword gleam rose from the ground and streaked across the sky. Those few people were prepared when they fled and drew their weapons one after another. After a few sounds of swords colliding, it was as if there was a rain of blood in the sky. A slightly short and sturdy man walked into the courtyard and sneered, "We can't even get through today, so how can we talk about tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? The most important thing for a family is to be neat and united. Since all of you came to Dayo together, I will send all of you down together." The other burly men who leaped into the courtyard were speechless. These words sounded rather imposing the first time they heard them, but they couldn't stand it when Sir Ren said it every day. Rinpoche had already said it more than 10 times in the past 2 months. "Sir Tai, there are no survivors," someone quickly reported after checking the corpses. "Bring the corpses back to be used as fertilizer for the flowers. Recently, I got some good stuff from the Department of Agriculture and Livestock. I heard that they were made by Principal Ren. One is called a sweet potato and the other is a pumpkin. I believe that they require human blood to grow well." Tai Yin made a gesture, turned around and walked out. From what these fellows said just now, there was no one else. Maybe they were just fooling him. Even if they were telling the truth, there was no guarantee that no one else would sneak in. Chapter 318. A week had passed. Rinpoche nodded his head in satisfaction as he looked at the tattered trailer, which was even more damaged than before. "Remember 1 month." Rinpoche pointed at Tong Lan and Shurgan. "Everyone is a brick in Dayo. Wherever it is needed, we will carry it. Regardless of your status, work hard. The pail and brush are all there. I hope the toilet will be clean the next day." Rinpoche waved at everyone, turned around and floated away. Everyone was dejected. However, this situation had been expected 2 days ago. Shurgan accepted it quickly, cupped his hands at everyone and said, "Brothers and sisters, I have troubled all of you. Let's drink till we are drunk at Shanhui House. It's just that this little brother has one more thing to trouble everyone with." Shurgan was slightly embarrassed and said, Everyone please aim properly these days and don't spill outside. Everyone was speechless. Tong Lan's face was puffed up like a bun. She was angry. It made people want to pinch her. However, everyone knew that she was cursing in her heart and didn't want to provoke her. Why don't we get 2 odd job workers to clean up since Yagüe isn't around? Someone suggested. Shurgan smiled bitterly and said, he isn't that easy to fool. We don't know what will happen. Yagüe has a saying that is right. If you are wrong you have to accept punishment. If you are beaten you have to stand straight. Since things have come to this, you have to do what you have to do. Everyone naturally knew that Rinpoche wasn't easy to fool. Seeing this they didn't say anything else and left with a sigh. This was the first time the 49 students worked together to do something, but unfortunately, it ended in failure. The next day, Rinpoche went to the men's toilet early in the morning. It was an old-fashioned school toilet. The school toilet left a deep impression on him when he was young. When it was built, people specially built a slope with cement. Every day, a large amount of water would be used to flush it down, and it would directly flow into the big hole outside the wall. However, the smell was still strong. After all, day was too hot. The toilet was a little dirtier than when the odd job workers cleaned it every day, but it was indeed cleaned. Since this was the case, he didn't need to ask for too much. After all, getting Shurgan and Tong Lan to clean the toilet was a very big matter in itself. After school at noon, when he was walking halfway, someone suddenly jumped out of nowhere and shouted, "Sir Ren, stop." The surrounding guards were startled at first, thinking that they had encountered an assassin. They even drew their swords halfway. He took it and saw that it was the Minister of Works, Tong Jinye. Lord Tong. When Rinpoche saw the ugly expression on Tong Jinye's face, he guessed that it was probably because of Tong Lan's toilet cleaning. Sir Ren, isn't it too much to ask Lan to clean the toilet? Tong Jinye shouted. A country has its laws and a mansion has its rules. No matter who it is, I will treat everyone equally, Rinpoche said. If you do this, Tong Lan will be ridiculed by others in the future. Even if Her Majesty is here today, I will not let this matter rest. Tong Jinye shouted. Rinpoche tilted his head and looked at him. He pressed a button on the walkie-talkie with one hand and said, Sir Tong, not many people knew about this at first, but after you shouted, everyone will know. If he remembered correctly, this seemed to be Shi Qing's residence. How can such a thing be hidden from others? Sir Ren, even though you and I get along well for Lan'er's sake, I have to let you see my sandbag-sized fists. Tong Jinye raised his fists and said, Sir Tong. Su Wei and the others immediately blocked in front of Rinpoche. Get out of the way or I will beat all of you up too, Tong Jinye said in a rough voice. Sir Tong, this is our duty. Su Wei frowned. In that case there is no need to say more. Today I will let all of you know why flowers are red. Tong Jinye snorted and appeared in front of Su Wei in an instant. He bent his legs slightly, and his body was half a meter above the ground. He was the same height as Su Wei and the others who were sitting on the fork-horned cow. Then he threw a heavy punch at Su Wei. Su Wei met it with a punch as well. After a head-on collision, Su Wei was immediately sent flying. Tong Jinye pounced on Rinpoche from above. Protect, sir! Someone shouted and jumped from the fork-horned cow. However, he was slapped down by Tong Jinye. Rinpoche saw that Tong Jinye's speed was as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, he had sent Su Wei and another bodyguard flying. Rinpoche raised his hand and fired a shot at Tong Jinye. In any case, he knew that he couldn't hurt Tong Jinye and was only trying to slow him down. When Tong Jinye saw Rinpoche holding a small black object in his hand, his pupils shrank. In an instant, he turned his body in the air, causing Rinpoche to miss his shot. Then he slapped the bodyguard below him down from the fork-horned cow. Using this force, he made a half-turn in the air and pounced on Rinpoche again. Today I will let you know what a sandbag-sized fist looks like. Tong Jinye laughed wildly in the air. A red silhouette suddenly appeared beside Tong Jinye. Before anyone could see the red silhouette's movements clearly, Tong Jinye flew like a cannonball and smashed into the wall of the residence next to him. He even caused half of the wall to collapse. After that blow, the red silhouette landed on the back of a fork-horned cow. She stood there with a calm look on her face. Greetings, Your Majesty, everyone said in unison. How big is a sandbag-sized fist? The Empress asked coldly. Tong Jinye returned to the courtyard dejectedly. Your Majesty, I want Lan'er to practice martial arts with him every day and teach him punches and kicks, but he made me clean the toilets. Sir Tong, a man should be clear about his actions. Even though Tong Lan accompanied me to practice martial arts, Even if she didn't contribute much, she still has to be punished for her wrongdoings. This is the most basic principle. Furthermore, she isn't the only one cleaning the toilets. There's also Great Elder's son, Shirgan. Great Elder hasn't said anything yet, Rinpoche said righteously. Tong Xingye frowned and seemed to have thought of something. Then he clapped his hands in realization and said, "No wonder Great Elder told me about this. Otherwise I wouldn't have known. He actually dug a hole for me. I'll find him now and make him pay. Your Majesty, I'll take my leave first." Rinpoche's eyes were bright and full of expression. "Tong Xingye, you old bastard, can you act any better? Don't be in such a hurry to leave. You still haven't told me how big a sandbag-sized fist is." "I'm very curious," the Empress said faintly. Tong Xingye laughed dryly, cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, I just saw a sandbag-sized fist. It's really powerful and I'm very impressed. It's just that the fist was too fast and I really couldn't see it clearly." "In that case, I'll let you see it again." In a flash, the Empress appeared in front of Tong Xingye and sent him flying with another punch. Another half of the wall surrounding the Great Elder's residence collapsed. Shi Qing sat in the courtyard and looked at Tong Xingye, who was lying on the ground with blue eyes. He poured himself a cup of tea and drank it before saying slowly, "I won't settle the score with you for framing me just now, but you have to fix this wall, right?" Tong Xingye spat. Chapter 319. Next week's midterm exam will test the content you've learned during this period of time. Those who pass can go on an outing with me for half a month. Those who fail can stay at home and do homework. The amount of homework will definitely be enough for you to finish until I come back. Go back and study hard. Rinpoche propped his hands on the podium and said to everyone. Then he strolled away without caring about everyone's reaction. After Rinpoche left, the classroom exploded again. What is a test? What's an outing? Everyone was at a loss as they whispered to each other. They had never come into contact with such a thing before. However, there were two things that everyone knew. First, the so-called test was definitely related to what had been taught before. Secondly, if Yagüe was not satisfied, he would be in trouble. Although they didn't know what the qualification criteria were, everyone was prepared to go back home in the next few days and review everything they had learned previously. It had been almost 2 months since school started. According to the time, it should be time for the midterm exams. It was time for Rinpoche to let them experience the kind of despair that he felt after taking an exam in school. No matter what, these students were much better than he was back then. At the very least, there were no men's singles, women's singles, or mixed doubles. However, he felt that he should go back and find an assistant. He couldn't possibly write every exam paper by himself, right? He had this idea before, but it was delayed because of the Jin family and his escape. At this time he should find another assistant. However, Rinpoche felt that if he were to hire an assistant, there was an 80% chance that the assistant would receive a double salary. Thinking about it, it did not matter anymore. The country already knew everything it needed to know, except that it did not know that this was an alternate world. As long as he didn't say anything, no one would notice. After all, alternate worlds and the Blessed Enclave were similar, but there were some differences in some aspects. Back then, he had hidden himself in order to divert the key point away from himself. The legend of the Blessed Enclave had existed since ancient times, and there was a specific location for it. As for the other world, the secret was on him. Other than that, there weren't many secrets that needed to be hidden. Apart from that, telling them most of it wouldn't make any difference. In any case, they couldn't come over. Moreover, he was the only one who dealt with them, so it was impossible for them to do anything to him in a short period of time. When Rinpoche returned to Yangxin Palace Hall, he saw that the Empress's face was ice-cold, and her entire body was emitting an ice-cold killing intent. "Your Majesty, what happened?" Rinpoche walked to the Empress's side and asked softly. The corners of the Empress's eyes twitched. Rinpoche knew that this was because the Empress's killing intent had reached a certain level. Now her mind was filled with thoughts of slashing people. After a while, the Empress coldly snorted and said, "Xia Baichong is simply too much. He actually wants me to hand over the murderer of the 7th prince and even dares to threaten me. If I don't hand over the murderer, I will invade the border with my army. I want to see what he can do to me." Rinpoche was slightly shocked. What happened? The 7th prince is dead? He had a deep impression of that person who looked exactly like him. It could be said that he was the first person he wanted to kill after coming to this world. However, he knew that there was a huge gap between their statuses, so he suppressed this killing intent to the bottom of his heart. Who would have thought that he would actually die? It was simply too shocking. Someone actually dared to touch the seventh prince? How did he die? Where is it? Why would he look for you, your majesty? Rinpoche was surprised. The seventh prince had been gone for half a year, right? Why would he suddenly look for the empress? Rinpoche naturally knew that if he didn't remember wrongly, the name of the emperor of Great Xia was Xia Bailong. The Xia Baichong that the empress mentioned just now should be him. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be happy when this matter came to them, let alone a proud and arrogant person like the empress. The emperor of Great Xia actually used a bucket of sh*t to slander the empress. This was simply intolerable and he would definitely explode. I sent someone to kill him in Wulong Valley. The empress glanced at him, then turned her head and said coldly. Pfft. Rinpoche looked at the empress with an embarrassed look. Did the other party find the culprit? You killed the other party's son and in the end the other party came knocking on your door. Yet you still say that the other party is too much of a bully? The empress raised her head and said unyieldingly, the person that I sent didn't leave any traces behind. It's impossible for him to know that I was the one who did it. He actually dared to slander me. Rinpoche silently gave her a thumbs up in his heart. Then he nodded his head in agreement and said, indeed he is too much of a bully. He actually dared to look for your majesty without any evidence. The empress deeply agreed with him. Rinpoche changed his tone and said, however, I feel that he is just looking for an excuse. I'm afraid that they are going to attack us in advance. The empress pondered for a while and nodded her head, I'm afraid that's the case. Rinpoche pondered for a long time and tried to analyze, Great Xia has long had the intention to attack us. Originally there was still 1.5 years' time, but it was suddenly brought forward. Looking for your majesty is just a pretense to find an excuse to launch an attack. However, now that they aren't ready, there must be something that forced them to attack us. Is there any conflict in Great Xia that the emperor wants to shift the conflict? Or is it? Rinpoche put himself in the other party's shoes and thought about it. The second possibility wasn't small either. In fact, it could be both reasons that made Great Xia suddenly prepare to attack. Or the 10,000 soldiers that died in Great Xia's territory previously scared him. He doesn't know how many ingredients are needed to concoct that poison and how long it will take. But, generally speaking, concocting a poison always requires a lot of ingredients and time. He is afraid that we will concoct more poison. He will think that if we had a lot of that poison, we would have already attacked them. I haven't been in Dayo for a long time, so no matter what, I won't have a lot of poison on hand. I have concocted so many poisons in such a short time in Dayo that tens of thousands of people lost their lives. If I have more time, I'm afraid that I will be able to concoct more poison, and they will be in big trouble. They might as well attack in advance and not give me time to concoct more poison. The empress tilted her head and looked at him. This makes sense. What does your majesty plan to do? Rinpoche asked. No matter how the empress answered, the other party was definitely going to attack them. Even if they didn't attack now, they would definitely attack in 1.5 years. It wasn't good or bad to make a move now. Just like what he said before, Dayo and Great Xia weren't ready. First, kill Gu Zicheng as a sacrifice to the heavens. Since Great Xia dares to invade us, let them all die, the empress said coldly. Thinking about how she was wronged by Xia Baichong, she was filled with anger and couldn't appease her anger without killing. Poor Gu Zicheng. After defending for more than 10 years, he still couldn't escape death. Your Majesty, I have a book that I can give to Xia Baichong. It will definitely make him vomit blood. Rinpoche rolled his eyes and came up with evil ideas. In any case, the war was going to start. It would be best if he could infuriate Xia Baichong to death. Oh. The empress was slightly curious. What was Rinpoche going to write? Bring me a brush and paper, the empress instructed Hong Yuan. After a short while, a small table, paper and brush were placed on the table. Rinpoche sat down, ground the ink, moistened the brush and then closed his eyes to rest. After a long time, when his energy, qi and spirit were at their peak, he picked up the brush and started writing. The empress looked at him with a look of disdain. Your words look like they were crawling out of chicken claws. Do you even need to prepare? Even though his words looked like they were crawling out of chicken claws, the content immediately turned the empress's gloomy mood into a sunny one. The Empress of Dayo to Xia Baichong. My old friend was as arrogant as you, but now the grass on his grave is 5 meters tall. Looking at the grass on his grave, I think of my old friend who was as arrogant as you. My old friend is like you, but the grass on his grave is as high as my eyebrows. Rinpoche's brush was like the wind, and his strokes were like dragons and snakes. He finished writing in one breath. Rinpoche looked at it from top to bottom and was very satisfied. Then he asked curiously, "Your Majesty, why did you kill the seventh prince?" The Empress looked at him with a smile on her face and said, "He was too ugly, I hate him." Rinpoche was speechless. Chapter 320. That afternoon, the Empress gathered everyone in the imperial court to discuss this matter. Everyone's reaction was even more intense and unyielding than the Empress's. On the spot, there were people who wanted to kill Gu Zicheng as a sacrifice to the heavens before sending troops to Great Xia. As for how the seventh prince of Great Xia died and who killed him, no one cared. There was only one thought in everyone's mind. I haven't even caused trouble for you, yet you dare to cause trouble for me? If you want to fight, let's fight. Do you think I'm afraid of you? They might as well fight their way to Great Xia and plunder. Shi Qing and Kuzhai, who were more mature and prudent, only stroked their beards in silence. Great Elder, do you have anything to say? The Empress looked at the reactions of the people below her, and it wasn't beyond her expectations. To the Aboriginals, such a reaction was expected. Whoever had the bigger fist was the boss. Between the two countries, only the weak would defend themselves. I feel that we should warn the Protectorate of the North, the Protectorate of the Northeast, and the Protectorate of the Southeast, especially the Protectorates of the Northeast and the Southeast. I'm afraid that the Yun Nation and the Qin Nation will also make strange moves, so we should be on guard at all times. There was also the problem of salt. After the war, the number of salt merchants from the Yun and Qin kingdoms would be greatly reduced. Salt would probably be a big problem. Our days on the mountain will be even more difficult, Shi Qing said in a deep voice. The Empress nodded her head slightly. Salt was indeed a big problem. After the war, the trade routes would definitely be affected. At that time, the amount of salt transported into Dayo would be greatly reduced. Now, it all depended on Rinpoche's trip to the mountains. Your Majesty, instead of being on guard, why don't we strike first and gain the upper hand? We can directly invade the Yun Nation and occupy the salt fields. Then the salt problem will naturally be solved. Even if we can't, we can still plunder them. The cities of the Yun Nation can't possibly lack salt, right? Someone immediately followed up. Qin Xuan stepped forward and said. The Empress didn't say a word after hearing this. It wasn't a problem for 15,000 soldiers to block the Yun Nation, but it was impossible for them to penetrate the Yun Nation. However, seizing the cities of the Yun Nation and plundering the ironware and salt was very likely to succeed. Of course, the price was equally high. At that time, they would definitely be pincered by the Yun Nation and Great Xia. Even with Dayo's strength, fighting on two fronts at the same time was a little strenuous. Defending and attacking were two completely different things. How's the recruitment of new soldiers going? The Empress asked. Your Majesty, the recruitment has been completed. A total of 20,000 people have just entered the camp. The recruit training had just begun and it would take at least half a year. However, I'm afraid that we don't have enough weapons and equipment. The armory is filled with rats. The last few supplies were sent to the Protectorate of the North 2 months ago. The Empress nodded and said, use the wooden saber to train first. After that, he asked Feng Ho about the forging of military equipment. Speaking of this, Feng Ho's face was filled with joy. Currently, Mount Damo produced close to 5,000 kilograms of iron every day. In less than 3 months, they had already produced a total of 600,000 kilograms of iron, which could be used to forge 30,000 weapons. Nowadays, the iron ingots that were sent to Jingtian furnace every half a month were piled up like a mountain. However, at this time, the forging of weapons depended on repeated hammering to remove the impurities, and then adding beast blood to change the composition of the long saber so that it had a certain alloy characteristic. Even a good master could only forge 3 standard long sabers a day. Jingtian furnace had a total of more than 20 skilled craftsmen. Adding in some ordinary craftsmen, they could only produce no more than 100 weapons a day. Right now, there were about 3,000 standard long swords piled up in the Jingtian furnace. This number had already made Feng Ho overjoyed. After he said this, everyone was surprised. They didn't expect that so many weapons could be forged in just 2 months. Following that, everyone was also delighted. At this rate, they would be able to equip an army of 10,000 in 2 months. One had to know that the Aboriginals only had a total of 90,000 soldiers. With the combat power of the Aboriginals, 10,000 fierce warriors could be used as an army of 100,000 soldiers from the other 3 nations. The Empress nodded and asked, can it be faster? Feng Ho thought for a while and said, at most, 150 long swords can be forged every day. This way they could forge 4,500 longswords every month. Everyone in the imperial court was satisfied. However, the empress still felt that it wasn't enough. Even though she didn't respond to Qin Chuan's words just now, she was really moved. Dayo lacked too many things. Especially after Rinpoche went to Earth for so long, he increasingly felt that Dayo was lacking in various resources. In particular, to develop to the level of Earth, not only did they need knowledge, they also needed various resources. Not only did they need salt, but they also needed iron, copper, and various other metals. And a lot of manpower and material resources. She wanted to build a new city, but what could she do without money and manpower? She wanted to build roads, but what could she do without money and manpower? The palace's treasury was empty, and Rinpoche's training could still last for more than a month. What could she do without money? Rinpoche had thought of the same problem before, but he wanted to do it through commercial means. The empress's idea was more direct. Rob. No one. The soldiers of the Yun nation in Great Xia, as well as those commoners, were all humans. When they were chatting, Rinpoche mentioned that it would be best to use these people as coolies to build roads. Even though the empress didn't say anything at that time, she took note of this matter. No money? They would have money after conquering the Yun nation. After conquering the Yun nation, they wouldn't just rob and run like before. Instead, they would occupy the entire Yun nation. As for how to manage it after conquering it, that would be a matter for the future. Wasn't there still Rinpoche? Let him think of a way. There were more than 50 ethnic groups in their country and he knew what to do. However, if they wanted to conquer the Yun nation, the current army was definitely not enough. Another 20,000 wouldn't be enough either. The empress was slightly distracted on the throne. Tong Xingye took 2 steps forward and said, "Your Majesty, regarding the matter of weapons, Principal Ren might have a way. He once said that there's something that can turn iron into steel and can be made into weapons without repeated forging." Tong Xingye's words pulled the empress back to reality. "I understand. I will ask him in a while," the empress said. She was silent for a while, and a thoughtful expression appeared on her face. Seeing the empress's expression, everyone kept quiet and waited for her to speak. "How many soldiers do you think we need to conquer the Yun nation and incorporate it into Dayo?" the empress asked. The atmosphere in the hall froze all of a sudden. Everyone didn't expect the empress to actually say such words at this time. Furthermore, she even said it with a serious face. "Your Majesty, are you serious?" "Your Majesty, we need an additional 60,000 soldiers on top of the 20,000 new recruits," Qin Chuan immediately said in a loud and clear voice. From his reaction speed, it was obvious that he had this idea for a long time. Otherwise, he might have to bend his fingers for a while. This subject has already thought about it. The Yun nation has a total of 400,000 soldiers. If we go to war, they will continue to recruit more soldiers. With the strength of the Yun nation, they should be able to reach 700,000 soldiers or even more. It would take at least 60,000 soldiers to conquer the Eastern Sea. After we attack the Yun nation, Great Xia and the Qin nation won't just sit back and watch. Furthermore, if we lengthen the line of soldiers, we will be vulnerable to attacks from all sides. We will need at least another 20,000 soldiers. Pulling the battlefront into the Yun nation's territory would involve many aspects. Get ready to recruit another 20,000 soldiers, the empress said. Yes. Qin Chuan's face lit up with excitement. Your Majesty, if we recruit another 20,000 soldiers, I'm afraid we won't be able to supply them with food and pay. The 20,000 soldiers we have now is already the most we can do. Minister of Revenue Tu Wan immediately stepped forward. The empress propped her chin up with her index finger and said, "The army's provisions are in the Yun nation, waiting for Dayo's warriors to collect them. As for food." That afternoon, the palace discussion lasted until evening. When the empress was having her meal, she told Rinpoche about some of the things that were discussed. Rinpoche was immediately dumbfounded. What was going on? Previously, they were still preparing to deal with Great Xia's attack. Why were they attacking the Yun nation now? Moreover, there were so many people in the imperial court discussing it in full swing for an entire afternoon? And he basically passed? How willful are you people? How strange were their brain circuits? After a long while, Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he asked, "Your Majesty, are you serious?" The empress wiped her mouth, raised her head and rolled her eyes at him. Dayo lacks iron. Even though Mount Damo's daily output of iron is close to 5,000 kilograms, according to what you said, we still lack iron. Especially in order to develop to the level of your world, the amount of resources required would not be enough even if you emptied Mount Damo. Deo lacked iron, but the Yun nation had a lot of iron mines. Deo lacked money, and so did the Yun nation. Deo lacked craftsmen, and so did the Yun nation. Deo lacked labor, and the Yun nation was full of them. The Yun nation has everything we want, so why don't we conquer it? As for military strength, there were countless fierce warriors in the 60,000 mountains. What they lacked was something else. Therefore, what they had to consider now was the lack of weapons and food. After that, you will be responsible for thinking about how to make the people of the Yun nation behave. Do you have any more questions? Rinpoche, Your Majesty, you have evolved from buying and selling to robbing and snatching. In the past, he always felt that war was far away from him, even though he knew that Great Xia might not attack anytime soon. However, the development of the situation today caught him unprepared and also made him realize that war was far from as far away as he thought it was. Also, Deo really didn't lack labor as much as Your Majesty thought. There were still more than 10 million remnant citizens of the Hao nation living in retirement in the south. Your Majesty, why not the Qin nation? The Qin nation is located in the south of the Yun nation. It is located in a corner and is only adjacent to the Yun nation. It seems more suitable than the Yun nation, which is adjacent to Great Xia, and the Qin nation, Rinpoche said curiously. The Qin nation doesn't have as many resources as the Yun nation. Furthermore, there are too many waterways in the Qin nation. There are rivers everywhere, and as long as they break the bridges in many places, we will be delayed for a long time. Even if we occupy the Qin nation, it will be more troublesome. On the contrary, the Yun nation is a flat land. Rinpoche finally understood. He then gave the Empress a thumbs up and praised her. Your Majesty is indeed thoughtful. While others are still thinking about Great Xia, Your Majesty has already thought about poetry in the distance. You have also made plans for the future, allowing Deo to advance faster and faster, and laying a solid foundation for the rapid entry into the technological era. Your foresight is truly extraordinary. The Empress nodded in agreement. Chapter 321. Iron was relatively easy for Rinpoche to solve. He only needed to build a blast furnace and use water power to forge iron. Even if he used manpower to pull a heavy hammer with ropes, it would be more efficient than repeatedly hammering it. As long as there was enough steel, he could also equip every soldier with a breastplate. Aboriginal warriors had strong vitality, and a breastplate could reduce casualties. Furthermore, it wouldn't affect their movements. However, Rinpoche was a little puzzled about the issue of food. Pumpkins, potatoes, and sweet potatoes had just been popularized, and it would take at least half a year for a considerable harvest. At that time, these crops could be targeted at the commoners, reduce the consumption of meat, and replenish the army. There was a problem that he hadn't realized before. For Aboriginal warriors, especially on the battlefield, they had to eat a lot of meat in order to maintain sufficient physical strength. This was because the strength of warriors came from food, and the meat of animals in this world contained the most substances that could be converted into calories. No matter how much pumpkins and potatoes there were, they couldn't be used as staple food, let alone as staple food for the army. If they only ate sweet potatoes, and pumpkins, they wouldn't be able to do anything else for the day. After breakfast they would have lunch. After breakfast they would have lunch. After lunch they would have dinner. After dinner they would have supper. In this case there was only one way to replenish the army's rations, and that was to fish. The Aboriginals didn't eat much fish. On one hand, they were used to hunting and raising livestock and didn't have the habit of fishing. On the other hand, fish had thorns and were more troublesome to eat. Furthermore, fish weren't like livestock that could be sent somewhere alive. With Deyo's weather, they would start to stink after a day. Therefore, unless it was along the river and there was a lack of other food, fish wasn't usually on the menu of Deyo. Rinpoche had an idea. The two reasons why the Aboriginals didn't like fish could be solved with one method: canned fish, similar to canned sardines. After being processed at high temperatures, even the thorns could be chewed and eaten. This was a feasible method. There were two choices. One was glass canned food, which was easy to achieve since the glass factory was readily available. After filling a glass bottle, it would be heated at high temperatures, stuffed with a wooden cork and sealed with wax. Although the shelf life wasn't as long as vacuum canned food, it was enough. The drawback was that it was more troublesome to transport. The glass bottle was too heavy, and the canned food had to be packed with layers of grass. Otherwise, with Deyo's roads, it would only be glass shards. The other one was tin cans. However, Rinpoche did not know if there were any tin mines in Deyo. What's more, making a tin can didn't just require iron and tin. It also required many other techniques. When the Empress saw that he was frowning, she asked him about it. He then told her about his idea of making canned fish. After hearing this, the Empress wrinkled her nose slightly and seemed to be somewhat happy. This is a good idea. Glass cans will do. You can make them bigger. I always felt that the cans on your earth are too small. They can't even be eaten in one bite. Rinpoche clapped his hands and said, "Yes, we can make them into glass barrels or terrariums. Make them thicker and it will be easier to manufacture and transport them. Your Majesty is indeed talented, to be able to think of such a good solution in such a short time. I didn't expect it." The Empress snorted happily and tilted her head up slightly. Rinpoche felt that the Empress was becoming more and more adorable. His heart was always tempted to kiss her. However, he still had to return to Earth at night. In order to prevent himself from returning in a seriously injured state, he gave up on this tempting idea. "My intuition tells me that you seem to be up to no good just now." The Empress gave him a sidelong glance. "Your Majesty, I'm innocent." That night Rinpoche returned to Earth. He recruited an assistant and found someone to prepare the exam papers. At the same time he searched for ancient forging press drawings on the internet. Based on the learning progress of these Aboriginal students, their literacy level was roughly at the level of a 4th grade primary school student. Mathematics was also at the level of a 2nd grade primary school student. Physics and chemistry were outstanding subjects, and their progress was different. It was impossible for them to simply pass the exam papers in school. They had to find someone to specially come up with a set of exam questions. When the news of Rinpoche's search for an assistant was discovered by the nation, there was another round of intensive analysis. After analyzing the gender, age, appearance, height, personality, and other aspects, Rinpoche had an assistant by his side a few days later. Looking at the Adam's apple and the gender on the information, it should be a woman. The way she spoke and walked was a little like a man. Her appearance was more masculine, and she was also flat-chested. This was the most suitable result after many people analyzed the situation. When Rinpoche saw this candidate, he didn't know what to say. Even though the previous candidates were either not very pretty or 7 feet tall, he had no choice but to reluctantly give up even though he approved in his heart. However, this person really exceeded his requirements, right? Furthermore, there was a man's name, Shin Feng. Putting the gender of this person aside, the other aspects were very much in line with Rinpoche's requirements. In the future, Rinpoche could hire this person for anything. After some thought, he hired this person to bring along the exam papers and the street lighting equipment. These 2 days he hesitated on whether to bring the street lighting equipment or salt. Bringing 600 kilograms of salt at a time was completely inadequate for Dayo. To ensure that more than 30 million people consume salt, they would need about 2 million kilograms of salt a month. This was under the current situation where the salt intake of the people in Dayo was only half that of the people on Earth. To achieve the normal salt intake, they would need at least 4 million kilograms of salt. Rinpoche would return to Earth after 5 days of classes every month. At most, he would only need 2,600 kilograms of salt, which wasn't very meaningful. It was better to set up the street lamps in the palace first. He would go to the Black Pool in a few days to take a look at the salt. If it didn't work there, he could only go to the Yun Nation to snatch it. After the first day of discussion, the Imperial Court of Dayo discussed for a few more days. The matter of attacking the Yun Nation was almost decided. As for Great Xia, no one considered it. In any case, they would deal with it as it came. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Gu Zicheng wasn't sacrificed to the heavens. Instead, he was sent to prison. Everyone in the embassy was sent to prison. Only one person was sent back to Great Xia with a letter of credence. However, everyone was clear that the day Great Xia attacked was the day Gu Zicheng would be sacrificed to the heavens. It was time for this legend, who had lived for so many years, to come to an end. On the 4th day of the discussion, news came from Ping City. 3 days ago, Dayo had increased its troops by 200,000 at Tiesua Pass, Qingyang Pass and Yunluo City. On the same day that the Empress received the questioning from the Emperor of Great Xia, the reinforcements from Great Xia arrived at night. These few days, the Protectorate of the North discovered that there was more smoke in these 3 cities than usual. They used the drones that Rinpoche left behind to detect it from the sky. The reinforcements from Great Xia were faster than expected. This also showed that, like what Rinpoche said, the Emperor of Great Xia was just looking for a reason to attack. He simply didn't care about the Empress's explanation. The war was already inevitable. Chapter 322. Look at your own papers. You are not allowed to look around or look at other people's answers. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Rinpoche sat at the front of the classroom and scanned everyone with his hawk-like eyes. The Type 81 rifle was placed on his knees and the threat was obvious. Everyone looked at the papers that had just been handed out. They finally knew what an exam was. Everyone frowned and looked around. When Rinpoche's words were passed down, everyone immediately lowered their heads and looked at their own papers. After a while, everyone picked up their pens and started to answer. These days, everyone had gotten used to the brush made from the feathers of a big bird. They dipped the brush in ink and started to write. After getting used to it, it was much faster than using a brush. Bang! The sudden gunshot startled everyone. Dulalu, I'm warning you. If you look to the side again, you will have to recuperate at home, Rinpoche said faintly. Dulalu was shocked. He muttered in his heart and looked at his own papers obediently. The others didn't dare to do anything. After all, guns were a big deterrent to them. Even though they wouldn't die, it was still very painful. After an hour, the alarm clock that Rinpoche placed at the side suddenly rang, giving everyone another shock. This was also the first time they saw an alarm clock. Time's up. Hand me all the papers. Rinpoche patted the desk beside him and said to everyone. After everyone handed in their papers, he took the papers and left. After he left, everyone started to ask each other, what's the speed at which sound travels? What's the melting point of iron? Does a convex or concave lens emit light? Rinpoche first sent the papers back to Pingle Park. Along the way, there were already many thick wooden pillars erected on both sides of the road. They were about 6 meters tall and every pillar was about the same thickness. After the bark was peeled off, a layer of plant sap was applied to the pillars, which had a certain antiseptic effect. In addition, the wood itself wasn't easily eaten by insects, so it should be able to be used for a few years. These pillars had just been installed, and the street lamps hadn't been installed yet. The batteries and street lamps that were brought here weren't enough to install all these. When Rinpoche arrived at Yangshin Palace Hall, he saw a few boxes on the ground. A few craftsmen were already waiting at the side. Rinpoche first taught these craftsmen how to connect the solar panels to the batteries and light bulbs. Even though they didn't know what they were used for, they did a good job under Rinpoche's instructions. First, one of them leaped to a height of more than 2 meters. Then they climbed to the top like apes, clamped their legs on the wooden pillar, and used a rope to hang the solar panel, battery bulb and lampshade from the basket up. Then they began to install it. After they were done with their act, Rinpoche climbed up to take a look. Surprisingly, their act was pretty good. At first, he was a little slow, but after a few sets he became more and more proficient. Rinpoche felt that the learning ability of these craftsmen was much better than that of the idiots in the academy. 20 sets of street lamps were installed in one afternoon. 6 of them were installed in front of the Yangshin Palace Hall, and the rest were installed on the road leading from the Yangshin Palace Hall to the Pingle Park. Rinpoche hoped that this section would at least light up first. After he was done with all these, he entered Yangshin Palace Hall to accompany the Empress and wait for nightfall. Are you going to the mountains in a few days? The Empress asked. Yeah. Salt is a big issue. I will solve it this morning. If I can't solve it, I will think of other ways as soon as possible, Rinpoche replied. He wasn't sure if they could produce well salt, but he had to give it a try. The Empress nodded her head and didn't say anything else. However, from tonight onwards, the outside of Yangshin Palace Hall will always be lit up. When your Majesty goes out to look at the stars, you won't need to carry a lantern anymore, Rinpoche said with a smile. Speaking of street lamps, the Empress was a lot happier. Even though there were still various differences between Dayo and Earth, she still had to take things step by step. Looking at the gradual changes in the palace and the students learning the things that Rinpoche taught, she felt that she would be able to see Dayo become as prosperous and beautiful as Earth in her lifetime. Great Xia sent out their troops today, the Empress said casually. So fast. Rinpoche was a little surprised. It had only been a week since the last time the Emperor of Great Xia questioned them. Great Xia couldn't wait any longer. Since they have already decided to fight and are ready, they naturally won't delay. The Empress wasn't surprised. In the afternoon, 150,000 soldiers from Chesua Pass were arrayed in front of Ping City. There were also catapults and other military equipment. However, General Hong Wu said that their target might be Shun City and Ziyue City. He has already ordered them to strengthen their defenses and be careful of night attacks. As for the specifics, we will know tomorrow, the Empress said faintly. These few days Rinpoche had been looking at the maps of Dayo and Great Xia. The cities and checkpoints adjacent to Dayo were mainly these: Chiesua Pass and Ping City, Qingyang Pass and Shun City, Yunluo City and Ziyue City. Of course, there were also large plains, mountain ranges and valleys that connected the two countries. However, these were the main places. If they didn't destroy these three places and came from other places, it would be very easy to be blocked. Furthermore, the logistics would also be difficult to sustain. Therefore, if their target was the whole of Dayo, they had to destroy one of the cities to ensure a smooth route. General Hongwu should be able to stop them, Rinpoche said. Rinpoche didn't know much about Hongwu, but he had been stationed at the border for decades and had an extremely high reputation. His knowledge of military strategy wasn't comparable to that of ordinary people. He still had 30,000 Aboriginal warriors in his hands, as well as drones, binoculars and walkie-talkies provided by Rinpoche. Presumably, it shouldn't be a problem to stop the Great Xia army for a short period of time. The Empress nodded and said, "That's natural." Her tone was full of trust for Hongwu. After the two of them had dinner, Rinpoche heard a small commotion outside. He turned his head and saw that the sky was already dark. However, it was different from the darkness of the past. There was still a certain amount of light, and he knew that the street lamps were sufficient. "Your Majesty, let's go out and take a look. The starry sky tonight must be exceptionally beautiful." Rinpoche extended his hand and invited the Empress. "All right," the Empress replied with a smile. Rinpoche took the opportunity to hold the Empress's hand and walked out. At this moment, both of them could see the light coming from outside. When they left Yangxin Palace Hall, they saw that the guards outside were looking up in a daze. They were practically unable to close their mouths. Previously, when these pillars were installed, no one expected them to have such an effect. After the sky turned dark, they actually lit up automatically. Furthermore, the lanterns that were commonly used in the palace couldn't be compared to them. At this moment, there were 12 wooden pillars erected in the courtyard outside Yangxin Palace Hall. 6 of the wooden pillars were emitting a white light that illuminated the surrounding scenery. Although it wasn't as bright as daytime, the courtyard was still rather clear. Cough. Rinpoche coughed and the 4 guards outside finally reacted. They turned around and greeted, "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Empress nodded slightly and didn't say anything. She allowed Rinpoche to lead her under the street lamps. Rinpoche led the Empress out of the courtyard of Yangxin Palace Hall. There were still 2 rows of street lamps outside, but only 1 row was lit. The 2 of them walked on this path. 2 figures, one in black and one in red, slowly moved forward. Rinpoche was in a good mood. Dayo also had street lamps. Although they were now brought over from Earth, they would be made by Dayo sooner or later. "The starry sky tonight is exceptionally bright," Rinpoche said with a smile. The Empress turned her head to look behind her, then looked in front of her and said, "It's only this distance." The distance between the 2 street lamps was 60 feet, which was about 20 meters. The 14 street lamps brightly lit up the entire road from Yangxin Palace Hall to Pingle Park. Many people in the Imperial Palace stared blankly at the road which had suddenly been lit up from afar. However, the other places were still in complete darkness. Very soon it will cover the entire palace. Then one day it will cover the entire Dayo, Rinpoche said with a smile. Chapter 323. Farming, farming, farming. I have to say it 3 times. This book was originally a farming novel. It was originally more of a daily life. It wasn't about leveling up quickly and slapping faces. It wasn't about leveling up quickly and slapping faces. It wasn't about leveling up quickly and slapping faces. Old readers know that my style has always been biased towards daily life. Chapter 324. It was nighttime. Ziyue City was 150 kilometers away from Ping City, and it was located on both sides of Ping City. The population was only tens of thousands of people, and the city walls were 5 meters tall. It wasn't considered a tall city, and it was considered short compared to ordinary border cities. However, over the past few decades, this city had been firmly guarding this line. At this moment, everyone in Ziyue City was wearing helmets and armor, but it wasn't considered solemn. Instead, it was very noisy and laughter could be heard from time to time. Every 2 meters on the city wall, there was a burly man wearing shabby leather armor and wielding a long saber standing there, looking into the darkness in the distance. Although they knew that the Great Xia army was in front, the darkness affected their vision, and they couldn't see far even with the help of the lights on the city wall. However, even though they knew that the Great Xia army was on their way, they didn't look nervous. Instead they looked relaxed. I heard that the Great Xia army has also arrived at Ping City and Shun City. Are they all out? They don't even want their lair anymore. Hehe, whoever kills 100 people will be promoted by 1 rank. Whether they can get promoted or not depends on this trip. Who knows, they might be able to fight their way to Great Xia this time. Everyone laughed heartily. Deputy Protector General, the Great Xia army has stopped 3 kilometers away from the north. We haven't found out their number yet. The Great Xia army has come from afar. Is there anyone willing to welcome them? Let them feel the enthusiasm of our fierce aboriginal warriors. The Deputy Protector General of the North, Xiongyu, sat on the seat at the front of the hall. Below him were 2 rows of more than 10 generals wearing leather armor. Your subordinates are willing to go. Almost everyone below stood up. Oh, your spirit is not bad. Xiongyu nodded. By Shirye Zhongqing, both of you will lead 1,000 men out from the north gate. After killing for a while, you will leave and return through the east and west gates. You will set off in 15 minutes and return in an hour. Xiongyu gave his orders and the 2 of them left with smiles on their faces. Continue to send scouts out of the city and see how many men they have, Xiongyu added. 15 minutes later, the north gate of Ziyue City opened, and 2,000 burly men wearing leather armor whizzed out. After separating for a distance, they brandished their long sabers and sprinted. Although he was running, his speed was not much slower than that of a galloping horse. With the remaining strength, his running speed was almost the same as Usain Bolt, and he did not slow down even after running for a few miles. When they could already see the dense mass of troops under the moonlight, the 2 generals each shouted, "Kill!" The people behind him immediately let out beast-like roars and pounced towards the dense army in front of them. Everyone listen up. Kill. Following a clear voice, thousands of figures rushed out from the front of the army. What greeted them was a wave of crossbows, followed by a variety of weapons. Sabers, spears, swords, halberds, all sorts of weapons could be seen. Steel whips and iron pens could also be seen. Kill. Baishirya's eyes were filled with excitement as he slashed his long sword at the oncoming shadow. The other party seemed to be startled by the momentum of his long sword. Then, his body floated to the side like a leaf blown by the wind. Then, the long sword in his hand trembled and specks of silver stars appeared. Baishirya turned his body, and his blade force turned into a streak of white light that swept across his opponent's waist, instantly splitting it into 2. The long sword in his opponent's hand only left a trace of blood on his arm, as if he had been bitten by a mosquito. However, this opponent made him feel that something wasn't right. Someone in the Great Xia army who could use a weapon like a sword definitely shouldn't be this weak. You dare to kill my disciple? You're courting death. A loud roar came from not far away, and an old man holding a sword flew over everyone's heads and headed straight for Baishirya. Both parties' swords clashed, and both parties could feel the force from the other party's weapon. Baishirya took 2 steps back while the other party flew back 5 to 6 meters. It's an earth wheel expert from Great Xia. Baishirya immediately knew the strength of the other party, which was roughly equivalent to an intermediate earth wheel expert. However, the martial arts technique that the other party used just now made him somewhat suspicious. It wasn't a move that was commonly used on the battlefield. More than half of the 18 consecutive sword strikes were feints. To use such tricks on the battlefield, the other party definitely wasn't someone from the army. He looked to his left and right and saw that the opponents that his subordinates encountered were similar to the ones that he had encountered. They aren't the Great Xia army, but those sects within the borders of Great Xia. Baishirya suddenly reacted. But why would they appear here? Just now, after that opponent was sent flying by a slash, he didn't know where to hide. Baishirya killed a few more opponents. At this moment, the sound of orderly footsteps could be heard in front of everyone. Every step was like a giant stepping on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. Countless black shadows could be seen moving in the darkness, and the tip of the spear reflected the cold moonlight. Following which, a bugle horn sounded, and the people who were fighting with the aboriginals immediately fled to the sides like rabbits. Their speed was so fast that the aboriginals couldn't catch up with them. Shoot. Hum. Countless arrows were shot from the darkness at everyone like raindrops. In an instant, 60 to 70 people were shot and turned into porcupines. In addition, many people had 1 or 2 arrow wounds on their bodies. When Baishurya saw the situation, he immediately let out a long howl, and everyone retreated at lightning speed. However, just as everyone was retreating, another wave of arrows rained down. Even though the casualties this time were smaller, 30 to 40 people couldn't dodge in time and were turned into porcupines. The people beside them immediately grabbed their clothes and ran away. When they realized that they weren't breathing, they chopped off their heads and hung them on their waists, leaving their corpses in place. Their idea was to bring the heads of the fallen soldiers back to the 60,000 mountains for burial. As for the corpses, they didn't care. On the way back to the city with everyone, Baishurya did a rough count. At least 300 people didn't make it back, and less than 100 heads were brought back. This made his heart ache so much that it almost bled. Of course, when they retreated, he didn't even consider the 500 to 600 corpses on the ground. "Sir," Baishurya called out after returning, "your subordinate is back to report on the mission." "How was it?" Xiongyu asked. "We attacked 1,000 people and lost about 300 of our own," Baishurya reported. Xiongyu and the others were a little surprised after hearing this. They originally guessed that the number of casualties would be around 100 to 200 people at most. After all, the other party had just arrived. How could they cause so many casualties after such a long and arduous journey? "Sir, what I encountered wasn't the Great Xia army. At that time, the people I encountered weren't using the martial arts techniques of the military battlefield. They were more like the moves of the martial arts sects of Great Xia. Furthermore, I saw many people who weren't very strong, but they ran extremely fast. It seemed like they were using the so-called body techniques that those people used," Baishurya replied. At this moment, Zhongqing also came in from outside and cupped his fists. "Sir, your subordinate is back to report on the mission." "How was it?" Xiongyu asked in a deep voice. 1,000 people attacked, 600 returned, and 400 died in battle. Zhongqing had an ugly look on his face. Following which, Zhongqing recounted the events that he encountered were exactly the same as Baishurya's. They were both entangled by the martial arts sects of Great Xia. Although the techniques of the other party weren't suitable for close combat, their strength was much higher than that of the Great Xia army. Furthermore, there were 2 to 3 people against one person. Even if they couldn't kill them, they could at least entangle them for a while. Furthermore, there were many earth wheel-level existences among them. Following which, the entire Great Xia army attacked with longbows and arrows. This caused the losses of the 2 teams that attacked to be much higher than expected. This change surprised everyone in the hall. Did Great Xia actually pull the sects of the martial arts sects onto the battlefield? At this moment, outside of Shun City, after the Great Xia army dispatched their mounted scouts, the battle formation split into 2 sides. 20 horses dragged round objects that were in the shape of pokes and pushed them to the front of the battle formation. They were arranged in a straight line, and each and every black cylinder cast from fine iron was aimed at Wuxia City, which was a few kilometers away. Chapter 325. Boom. 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 Following a series of deafening booms, more than 10 huge stone bullets smashed into the walls of Wuxia City. However, more than half of them flew into the city and caused some accidental casualties. A small portion of them smashed into the city wall, creating a large pit. Is this their catapult? It's not as far as the previous ones, but the sound is a little louder. Xiongyu stood on the city wall and scratched his bald head. Why wasn't Great Xia as good as before? At this point in time, those iron tubes were already 700 to 800 meters away from Wuxia City, which was the limit of their firing range. When the previous round of booms sounded, Xiongyu brought everyone up to the top of the city wall to take a look. After taking a look around, he was somewhat puzzled. This new catapult wasn't as powerful as the previous ones in Great Xia, and he didn't know what use they had for it. After a full 30 minutes, just as Xiongyu was considering whether to go back and take a nap, the other party's iron tubes once again exploded with a loud boom. Every iron tube shot out a stone bullet that had a diameter of 6 inches and was polished into a round shape. Xiongyu suddenly leaped up, extended his arm and spun 2 rounds in the air. By the time he landed, there was already a round stone bullet in his hand. After tossing it in his hand twice, Xiongyu smacked his lips and said, "I thought they came up with some new tricks. It's not interesting at all." With a flick of his hand, he threw the stone bullet back. It hit one of the iron tubes. Immediately, gravel flew everywhere and a few screams could be heard. That iron tube was also smashed to the ground. "I'm going back to take a nap. I'm getting old and my stamina can't be compared to the younger generation. If there's anything, report to me immediately." Xiongyu had a bored look on his face. What was Great Xia up to this time? However, no matter what, with the 8,000 warriors in the city and the tens of thousands of aboriginal commoners who could single-handedly defeat the Great Xia soldiers, Xiongyu wasn't worried at all. "Yes, sir," everyone replied. At this moment, a sudden shout came from the sky. "Xiongyu, where are you going?" Following which, chains extended from the city wall under Xiongyu's feet and wrapped around his ankles. Following which, a huge spear shot toward Xiongyu with a sharp piercing sound. At the same time, 3 other figures dashed towards Xiongyu in the darkness like lightning. "Ha, 5 spirit wheel experts? Die for this old man." Xiongyu laughed out loud and waved a pair of iron fists towards the spear that seemed to be able to pierce through the city. 300 li away. Hongwu was reading a book in the mansion. Suddenly his eyes flashed. In the blink of an eye he appeared beside the wall. The longbow that was hanging on the wall appeared in his hand. He drew his bow and knocked an arrow, his whole body bursting with vigor. Many people in Ping City were shocked. They turned their heads to look into the city. They could all feel a huge beast opening its eyes in the residence in the middle of the city, baring its fangs at the sky. A bone arrow soared into the sky from the mansion with an aura that seemed capable of piercing through the heavens. "Your Majesty, urgent report." Xinjia rushed in from outside the hall and knelt on one knee. "Bring it to me," the Empress said faintly. The Empress opened the slip of paper that Xinjia had presented to her. Her face turned ice-cold with just one look. After reading it, he grabbed the slip of paper in his hand, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into dust. "Luchi, you're courting death." The Empress's voice was bone-chilling. She couldn't conceal her murderous aura, causing Rinpochen, who was nearby, to feel a chill run down his spine. "Your Majesty, what happened?" Rinpochen asked softly. General-in-Chief who supports the nation, Protector General of the North, Hongwu, fought with Lu Pinghai for 15 minutes. Hongwu was seriously injured, and Lu Qi left with severe injuries. The Empress squeezed out these few words from between her teeth. Xinjia didn't look surprised when she heard this. Instead, she looked very serious. It seemed like she already knew the contents of the slip of paper. Rinpochen was shocked after hearing this and asked, "How is General Hongwu?" One had to know that Hongwu was the stabilizing force of the Protectorate of the North. If anything happened to him, the Protectorate of the North would definitely be in chaos. "Even though his life isn't in danger, he won't be able to fight for a few months," the Empress said coldly. Rinpochen frowned. It was a good thing that his life wasn't in danger. However, Hongwu was seriously injured when Great Xia attacked. This wasn't good news. The importance of having the 9th most powerful expert in the world overseeing the front lines didn't need to be mentioned. Not to mention other things, as long as he killed the other party's commander-in-chief in the midst of the chaos, victory was basically set in stone. The Protector General of the North had always relied on his extremely strong individual strength and the fact that he was one of the top 10 experts in the world. Now that Hongwu was seriously injured, this reliance was halved. Even though he could still command the army, he was greatly affected. After all, this wasn't Earth, where a few top experts could take the head of the commander-in-chief amidst tens of thousands of soldiers. As a result, the mode of war in this world was somewhat different from Earth. It was just like how tens of thousands of Aboriginal soldiers could take decades to defeat hundreds of thousands of Great Xia soldiers. This was impossible on Earth. However, Great Xia was really aggressive this time. It seemed like they weren't as easy to deal with as everyone thought. Just as the Empress was full of murderous intent and Rinpochen was pondering, another urgent report arrived. The Empress only took a glance at it, and her murderous intent almost permeated out of Yangxin Palace Hall. In this battle, 7 Spirit Wheel experts and 78 Intermediate Earth Wheel experts from Great Xia suddenly attacked Xiongyu and the various generals on the city wall. At the same time, Great Xia launched an attack. The Deputy Protector General of the North, Xiongyu, was killed by 7 Spirit Wheel experts, and 2 of his opponents died in battle. At the same time, 6 generals from Ziyue City died in battle, and 3 were seriously injured. On the side of Great Xia, 17 Intermediate Earth Wheel experts were killed and 21 were injured. Pass down my order. Great Elder, Junior Elder, Minister of the 6 Ministries, and all the officials are to enter the palace for a discussion, the Empress ordered coldly. After Xinjia left, the Empress finally retracted her murderous intent after a long time. Rinpochen asked softly, "Your Majesty, did something happen?" The Empress placed the paper on the table. Rinpochen read it and his expression changed. According to this situation, Ziyue City couldn't be defended anymore. Great Xia was indeed the most powerful country in this world. Their first move was a thunderous strike, and it seemed like they wanted to take down Dayo in one fell swoop. Rinpochen also frowned. After a while the empress left. Rinpochen went to the garden outside of Yangxin Palace Hall and sat for a long time. He didn't know how the situation would develop and whether the aboriginals could withstand it. One had to know that after breaking through Ziyue City, Great Xia could directly enter the hinterland of Dayo. There would be a lot more room for maneuver and their strategic space and depth would be much greater. On the contrary, it would be much more difficult for Dayo to block this opening. Needless to say, the Protectorate of the North would probably be divided and surrounded by Great Xia. When the Empress returned at night, she didn't have the murderous intent that she had in the afternoon and was much calmer. Rinpochen took the initiative to pour a glass of wine for the Empress. Your Majesty, with the court officials around, we will definitely be able to stop the Great Xia army outside the hinterland. Ziyue City has already been breached, the Empress said. She received this news when she was gathering all the officials for a discussion. It wasn't beyond Rinpochen's expectations, but it was faster than he had imagined. I want to personally lead the army. This sentence from the Empress made Rinpochen realize that his peaceful daily life was getting further and further away from him. I will go with your Majesty. Rinpochen immediately replied. His future wife was going to the battlefield, and it was better for him to quickly follow behind. When he returned at night, he would ask the nation for a Vulcan cannon. If he couldn't defeat a spirit wheel expert, anyone below the peak of the earth wheel level would die. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.